Good morning. It is 11:08 and the State and Local Government and Veterans Committee will come to order. We do have a quorum. The first item on the agenda today will be the Veterans Policy Omnibus Bill. I will be presenting that. Senator Gustafson has kindly agreed to come take the gavel.
Senator Mitchell, when you're ready, and I understand you have 2 amendments.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. And this will be a delete everything. So even though technically the number of the file, which is Senate File 4429, has been heard before, I am hoping that we could just move the 2 amendments to get the delete everything in the shape and then discuss that. So I would like to move first the A2 amendment.
Senator Mitchell moves the A2 amendment. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Amendment adopted.
Madam Chair, I would also like to offer the A3 amendment.
Senator Mitchell offers the A3 amendment. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed? All right. Senator Mitchell, is the bill now in the order that you, or in the shape that you'd like to have it in?
Yes, Madam Chair. Okay. May I proceed?
Proceed.
Thank you. If it pleases the members of the committee, I'm actually going to address the A3 amendment first. The A2 is the delete everything, and it is the culmination of the different bills that we heard related to veterans in this committee. The A3 is something new this year, but not last year. It is related to the pilot Meals on Wheels program. The reason that this is a late add is because that program still has a little bit of money left in it that we would like to roll over. And so it is basically saying that that money can roll past the original date. The reason it hadn't, and you can see that starting on lines 5.32, any encumbered balance does not cancel and is available for the second year. The reason that that had not been heard here is because there is no additional cost, but we still had to talk to finance about that before we could proceed with that. That was all able to get done. So now that is rolled in with everything else. So that is the one new piece of this. With that new piece discussed, basically what we have in the delete everything is sections 1 and 2 relate to the authority of the adjutant general, making it clear that there is contract authority for construction, maintenance, other projects, and rental of military facilities. Section 3 authorizes the adjutant general to have the referral bonuses that would help with enlistment that we had discussed. Sections 4 through 11 modify provisions that relate to management, rental, exchange, sale of within the armory system. Also expanding how the adjutant general might convey property, working with municipalities, and directing funds for any sales within the Department of Military Affairs or within the Minnesota State Armory Building Commission. Section 12 clarifies who is allowed to obtain a copy of birth, death, marriage, different record certificates. And this was in relation to the request from the Veterans Service Office agencies doing that on behalf of veterans. Section 13 relates to veteran home administration and changes that the administrators serve at the pleasure of the commissioner. Section 14 allows the commissioner to operate the central pharmacy within the veterans' homes for the residents. Section 15 and 16 remove the cap on county funds for Memorial Day and Veterans Day observances. And again, to be completely transparent, the committee members might remember that there were two bills that seemed very similar but were slightly different. One was there were already appropriations allowed for Memorial Day, so one expanded it to Veterans Day. And then another one removed the cap on those. When we merged those two things together, there was an unintended kind of consequence of the two different bills where it expanded everything to Memorial Day and removed the cap, except for counties in relation to Veterans Day, removing the cap of their own expenditures, but not for service organizations. So, we did add that so that it removed the cap in all those situations so that it basically made more sense how the two different pieces fit together. Section 17 modified an existing appropriation for new veterans cemeteries, adding that potential cemetery in northwestern Minnesota. And so some of the bills included were those, was a mix from Gustafson, Senator Weber, Senator Pappas, Senator McQuaid, Senator Anderson, Senator Seeberger. So we also have a good mix of both Republican and Democrat projects. And with that said, that is the delete everything.
Thank you, Senator Mitchell. Members, any questions? Senator Anderson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Regarding the Metro Meals on Wheels, is there someone here to talk to that program?
Senator Mitchell.
Madam Chair, I can speak to the program, not anyone with the program. Oh, hold on. Oh, Mr. Johnson.
When you get to the table, please state your name for the record and you may proceed.
Good morning.
Good morning, Chair, members. Ben Johnson, Interim Deputy Commissioner, Programs and Services, and Legislative Director for the Minnesota Department of Veterans Affairs. Senator Anderson, happy to answer any questions as I'm able.
Senator Anderson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Johnson, regarding the Metro Meals on Wheels, can you give us some background on the benefits that this has provided, and also the reason for the extra money that, or the extra language that we have here on 5.32 through 5.34?
Mr. Johnson.
If I may.
Oh, Senator Mitchell.
Thank you. Senator Anderson, so this is something that we appropriated last year, and it was a pilot program. So veterans would fall under Meals on Wheels if they fit the regular categories for someone that would be eligible for Meals on Wheels. So, you know, a certain age, a certain level of disability, things of that nature. This pilot program expanded it last year to look at other veterans who might not fall into the eligibility, especially as part of the mission of Meals on Wheels is to actually meet people where they are. It's a little bit of a chance of someone to see them, check on them, especially given PTSD and other mental health issues that some of our veteran communities might have. It allowed more veterans to be eligible for the program if they didn't meet the criteria that was already there. So the money was already appropriated for the pilot program, but setting up a new vein of the program, recruiting volunteers, you know, they were trying to recruit volunteers that were in the veterans community anyway, and some other things. So there was about a 6-month lag as to when it launched. So now with the time that they were supposed to spend, utilize all the budget money within, there's about a 6-month lag in using the rest of it. So they were just asking for an extension of the funds that were already appropriated last year. The funds are already there so that they can still use the money remaining within that program.
So, Madam Chair.
Senator Anderson, follow up.
Yes, please. I didn't get an answer regarding how the program's going right now.
Senator
The
Mitchell.
results. What's the results of what we've done last year? as to today?
Senator Mitchell.
Senator Anderson, and I will defer to Mr. Johnson if he knows more, but they have been doing the outreach as was expected. I do not know the number of new people that are within the program off the top of my head, but that outreach has been going on, and much of the money has been used. Again, there was that 6-month lag, so we're just trying to make sure that the funding doesn't get cut off before the rest of the pilot is finished.
Mr. Johnson, any follow-up?
Chair, the only additional follow-up, Senator, I can provide some specific information on that number, but the Senator is correct that it has been progressing. And I also wanted to get on the record as saying that MDVA, that some of the lag in the development was on MDVA because there were so many new grants being appropriated funding last year. Some of the contract work was on our end, not on Metro Meals on Wheels. But I will provide that information to you, Senator.
So, Madam Chair, Mr. Johnson.
Senator Anderson.
I would like a report back on that program, how it's going, and because we're providing the money to go further for the next biennium, the rest of the biennium. I'd just like to know what the results are of that.
Senator Mitchell, any response?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Again, I would just reiterate that this is no new money. This is just the money that was already appropriated last year, making sure that little bit can roll over because the program was delayed in its starting. But absolutely happy to get a report.
Madam Chair,
Senator Anderson.
has the program actually started off? I mean, it's been delayed. It sounds like we're still in a delayed process from what you just told me. We've not started this yet?
Senator Mitchell.
Yes, we were, if I remember correctly, it was about 6-month delayed in starting, but it has started and it has been going and it has used a good chunk of the money. There is just because of the initial delay, a little bit of money sitting on the table that the way it was doled out would be lost, so to speak, if we weren't able to grant them this extension.
So, Madam Chair, all I want to...
Senator Anderson, through the chair,
All I want to know
please.
is what's going on with the program as it is. If it started 6 months late or if it started a year late, what are the results? What's the return on investment? That's what I want to know.
Senator Mitchell.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Again, I will reiterate that the program is going, that veterans are currently being served, and we can get you an exact number of that when we're able to.
Thank you, Senator Mitchell. Any other members? All right. Oh, sorry, Senator Lang, I didn't mean to miss you.
Oh, thank you, Madam Chair. And I do have an amendment that it's the A4 amendment. And I think everybody probably has that one in their packet. And this is, maybe not.
Senator Lang, you want to speak to the amendment?
Sure thing, Madam Chair. This is a bill that came from Senator Coleman. It got handed to me yesterday. And it sounds like it's a non-controversial item that allows the University of Minnesota Landscape Arboretum disabled veterans to be admitted without paying the entrance fee. As far as I know, as of right now, it has passed through the House. I think they're going to have it on the floor as a standalone bill. From what I've been told, it's not controversial. Shouldn't be controversial. The fiscal, they haven't done a fiscal note because they said they were going to eat the costs. So, and that's pretty much as I know about it.
It would have been with the landscape arboretum that wasn't developed in time.
Mr. Erickson, if you want to speak on the fiscal note.
Madam Chair and members, there's not a fiscal note on this provision. From what I'm looking at in the language, the fee that's being waived is charged by the University of Minnesota. In my understanding, this isn't a state set fee, so I don't think it's something that would have been captured by a fiscal note. It does look like there would be some sort of revenue loss here. It might be hard to actually put a number on it because it might be something that if the person just was not going rather than paying a fee in order to go, there might not be a revenue loss. So I'm trying to just quickly think through what the different angles of this, and I'm not sure that a fiscal note would actually show a cost here.
Senator Lang.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, that's kind of the gist of the amendment. So it's it's a constituent issue, from what I understand.
Senator Mitchell.
Madam Chair, I will say I was not brought this beforehand. It seems like a reasonable thing to do. My only concern is I literally, because I haven't seen it beforehand, haven't had a chance to verify with the place that would have the cost associated with it.
So, Madam
If-
Chair, I should probably have addressed that they are neutral on it. They don't, they're okay with the bill, so they were reached out to. I'm sorry.
Senator Lang, I'm sorry, who was okay with the bill?
The Arboretum in the University of Minnesota.
Senator Mitchell.
Again,
I didn't mean to
I
drop it
appreci-
on you, I swear.
I appreciate it. I'm a person that likes to personally verify information. Not that I'm not believing that they have been talked to.
It is.
I would be willing to potentially take this on, maybe on the floor, if we,
Yeah.
if I can just have time to check it,
Yeah.
if that's okay. But for now, I would request a no vote, only because I haven't seen this before, and I want to make sure that with the financial piece, all the ducks are in the row.
Madam Chair,
Members, Senator Lang.
I didn't think it would be a controversial item, so I'll just withdraw the amendment then if it's, I'd rather not have a no vote on it.
Members, any other questions, comments?
Madam Chair, I would like to move the Senate File 4429 as amended, then be referred to the floor.
Senator Mitchell moves that SF 4429 be amended, recommended to pass and place in general orders. Move to the floor. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed?
Aye.
Passes. Thank you.
Thank you for your help. Members of the committee, we are going to go to Senate File 3474, which is fifth on your agenda. And Senator Kunesh is on her way here. Members, thank you for your patience. Evidently, we were too fast on the first one, so we don't have all the testifiers we need for some of the other ones. Unless Senator Anderson, are your testifiers here? Are your testifiers here?
I believe so. Well, they're going to be online.
Yes, they are. Senator Anderson, would you be prepared to go? So, members and people following us online, we are going to switch to Senate File 4718. Oh. Thank you, Senator Anderson, for your willing to step forward. We will get to you. Senator Kunesh, please go ahead. So we will be back to Senate File 3474. Senator Kunesh, at your convenience.
Thank you so much for giving me this moment to present to you Senate File 3471. What this bill does is it creates a position, a library media specialist position that will provide leadership to our school library media professionals across Minnesota, as well as acting as a liaison to school administration. And in addition to this, this position will help with the school library funding and the definition of a school library media center that were passed in 2023. For probably the last decade and a half, library media specialists have been, oh, I'm sorry.
Senator Kunesh, if I can just reorient the rest of the committee. We had said 3474.
Oh.
It sounds like you're presenting 3471, which is fine. Would you
Oh.
like to present that first?
Okay,
It's okay, take a breath.
yeah, we will, as long as I've begun.
No, I just want to make sure everyone has the right materials
Okay,
out as you
got it.
discuss. Please
Got it.
proceed, 3471.
Yes, and I should mention that I do have the A3 amendment. And basically, this just expands or clarifies the responsibility of the state school librarian and how they would be performing their duties in providing advice and guidance in academic standard development, statewide library data collection from districts and charter schools, and then the opportunity for them to provide advice and guidance to the Department of Education staff as going forward. And that is the amendment.
Senator Swazinski moves the A3 amendment. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. The A3 passes. Senator Kunesh, if you could please continue with your bill.
Okay, so just to remind you that this is the establishment of a school, the state library, school librarian within the State Library Service Division of the department. And this position would assist the school librarians and the school libraries and their staff, the district staff, in the position as library media specialists. Let's see. This position would also collect ongoing data around the number of library media specialists in the state, their effectiveness, and pinpoint the need in each district. This person or individual will be able to either facilitate or guide library media specialists in professional development and training, paraprofessionals and district leadership, and then they will be the communication point for MDE and endorsing the pedagogy to library media specialists. And that is my bill.
Thank you. And we have testifiers listed of Andy Boudreau. Are you here? Could you please step forward? When you get settled, state your name and position for the record.
Hello, my name is Andy Boudreau, and I'm the Digital Learning and Instructional Media Coordinator for Osseo Area Schools.
Proceed.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, as I stated before, my name is Andy Bedeau. And besides being the coordinator of digital learning and instructional media, I am also a licensed library media specialist. And I'm here today to seek your support for Senate File 3471. Last year, significant progress was achieved in supporting school libraries in Minnesota. We are extremely grateful for the work which emerged from the 2023 legislative session, which included a definition of a school library, per pupil funding for the state library aid, and increased funding to the multi-types for ongoing programming, and a one-time school library census. It is critical that we not only maintain this momentum for 2023, but build upon it in 2024. School administrators and school librarians need direction from the state to offer guidance and advocacy on best implementation of these new resources. In October 2023, School Library Journal article titled Prioritizing State-Level Coordinators for School Library Programs outlined the benefits of a statewide position. A statewide school librarian would be able to coordinate grant funding opportunities from the federal government, advocate for the importance of school libraries in education, collect data on the impact and effectiveness of school libraries for future planning, and plan and implement professional development for library media specialists and their staff. As districts and schools face tough issues like book challenges, the use of artificial intelligence in education, and the ever-increasing need for digital literacy and responsible use of technology and social media, a statewide school librarian is uniquely positioned to provide guidance and leadership to all school libraries in Minnesota. Thank you for your time, and please continue to support school libraries by moving Senate File 3471 forward. Thank you.
Thank you. And I believe we also have Sarah Swenson virtually.
Yes, hello. My name is Sarah Swenson. I'm the media specialist at Edina High School. Madam Chair and committee members, as I stated before, my name is Sarah Swenson, and I am a licensed media specialist and a national board certified teacher. This fall marked my 25th year of teaching at Edina High School. Thank you for your support of school libraries during the 2023 legislative session. Because of your work, great strides are being made in defining school libraries, increasing per pupil funding for school library aid, and supporting our multi-county, multi-type libraries, but we are not yet done. I'm here today to ask you for your support of Senate File 3471, the creation of a state-level school librarian position at the Minnesota Department of Education. The historic funding you provided in 2023 benefited school libraries, but there are questions about how to use those funds. Not all districts are using the funds as intended, and as budget cuts loom, licensed school librarians are facing cuts to programs and positions, myself included. District and school leaders need direction from the state on how to best use these funds and resources. A state-level school librarian, part of the Minnesota Department of Education, could provide this leadership as well as help with book challenges and also provide professional development statewide for licensed school librarians. In a time when students need school librarians more than ever to provide them with a robust collection of materials and teach them digital literacy and research skills, licensed school librarians need a state-level coordinator dedicated to school library services. I urge you to support Senate File 3471. Thank you for your time and support of all libraries across Minnesota.
Thank you for your testimony. Senator Kunesh, anything before we proceed to questions?
Nope.
Thank you. Do we have any questions? Senator Anderson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have not had any type of communication from my schools or from my communities, Monticello, Buffalo, anything of a need for another librarian, especially on the state level. So where is the need? Where is it coming from? Is it just to put another person to oversee these people? Because my wife is at the library 5 times a week, if maybe more. She loves being at the library, but in talking with the librarians there, they don't see a need for this, and it seems like it's adding to the bureaucracy. That's all I see. Give me some reasons for the purpose of this, that a school superintendent can't go back to the local librarians, that the local librarians can't be in touch with MDE to give them information that if they need it, they can get it without having to have some extra person in their way.
Senator Kunesh.
So this is specifically for school libraries, school library media specialists. So this is within the schools. In Minnesota, we have different levels or different areas of librarianship. So your local librarian, while they can certainly support the schools and support the school district and provide resources, provide books. I mean, when I was a library media specialist for 20 years, oftentimes if I didn't have in my collection a lot of books on a certain topic, and let's say a whole grade level was doing reports on whales, and I didn't have enough books on whales, I could reach out to them, and they would often provide those services. They might look for books for us, but this library, licensed library specialist at the state level would be the one that is able to coordinate all of the library media specialists in our school districts across the state and provide the resources that might be necessary. So if there's really unique professional development, if there are grants at the federal level or different organizations, most library media specialists are so busy they don't know about those grants that are available. So this person would be able to coordinate it and say, there are some grants coming up, let me help you do this grant. When I was at the Robbinsdale Middle School, I was made aware of a grant that was available for STEM items, furniture, all these different things that support the library. That library hadn't had an influx of any kind of resources in years and years. I mean, I think the furniture was from the 60s in there, and the kids didn't want to come in there. It wasn't attractive, it wasn't comfortable, it was outdated. And I didn't know about this grant until somebody mentioned it, and it took hours and hours and hours to fill out this grant, and then the interview process and all of those sort of things. That was something I did on my own time, and lucky, knock on wood, I received the grant and I could do a lot of great things for my library. So this individual would be able to organize, coordinate, provide those resources, help develop professional development for library media specialists, but this is specifically for the schools and not the general public.
And Madam Chair,
Senator Anderson.
and Senator Kunesh, I have not heard from my schools saying that they need somebody on top of their library, librarian that they have right now. My daughter's a librarian. She was a librarian in Japan. And I didn't hear her needing some other resource other than what she had available. So, Madam Chair, I'd just like a roll call on this bill.
Roll call requested. Roll call will be granted. Senator Barr.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And Senator Kunesh, I'm reading this, and I just want to make sure I got this right because I think there's a little confusion here. This isn't requiring every school district to do this. This is just saying the Library Services Division within the Department of Education must have this position, somebody who's a librarian on their board. Is that correct, or am I reading this way wrong?
Senator Kunesh.
This is one person, one position within the Department of Education.
Senator Barr.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So why wouldn't the Library Services Division within the Department of Education be made up of all librarians?
Senator Kunesh.
Well, there really isn't a library division in the state government. We have a state librarian, that's one person, that oversees all of the library, different systems, but there isn't a library division specifically in our state government.
Senator Barr.
Madam Chair, so, well, it doesn't say state government, it says the State Library Services Division of the department, which I'm assuming is the Department of Education since it was referred to earlier in that sentence.
Okay.
So if the Department of Education already has a State Library Services Division, which is what this says, why wouldn't that be staffed by the people in that division, the State Library Services Division, already be librarians?
Senator Kunesh.
They are librarians, and there's one person, from what I understand.
Senator Barr.
Thank you, Madam Chair, for your indulgence. I know it's a lot of fast back and forth, but so basically what that one person that's already there, you're just redefining what their role is then?
Senator Kunesh?
No, I'm adding one person that would join in this with the state librarian. So right now, there's one person, there would be two. And the second person would be specifically for school and education.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Senator Barr. Senator Curran?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And Senator Kunesh, I share some of Senator Anderson's sentiments, is that what you described is I think, coordinate grant funding and responsible use of technology. And so far, I've just heard those are general roles from the Department of Education. And there's 330-plus school districts. One person, I assume all those school districts are being served today by the Department of Education. I haven't heard a single person say that we need it. The roles and responsibilities are pretty vague. For one person, as you described it, to serve 330 organizations throughout the state, and I just don't see any compelling need for it. When you look at all the schools that are out there, and I'm a little worried about the overall statement of responsibilities. It seems pretty vague and pretty open-ended, and I would rather see those resources applied to our local school districts and prefer to keep local control versus this state-level person, which I believe would lead into guidance. We're already having a conversation about books and content and all of those things. I just see another layer of the state stepping in to squash local control of our school boards, in addition to removing their local control. I just don't think that we have a need for it, and with that, I would urge a no vote.
Thank you. Senator May-Quade?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm wondering, Andy, since we have you sitting here, would you just be willing to say a few things about what this would do for your job as a media specialist at the Edina Public Schools? What
Could
this
you-
role would mean? Yeah.
Can you please restate your name for the record and then proceed with the question?
Yes, so Andy Badeau, and I'm the coordinator of digital learning and instructional media for Osseo area schools. Sarah, my colleague, is from Edina Public Schools. And what I really see this role as doing and providing for Osseo area schools and the 25 library media specialists that I work with is really that leadership level. So looking at having academic standards in library and technology that would be consistent across the state. Also the grant funding, which frankly, not knowing all the opportunities, so making those better known so that we can get more funding for our students in our school libraries. And then in addition, I just think being an advocate for school libraries, in particular with the challenges with book challenges and artificial intelligence, I think is going to be a big topic for schools in general, but I think library media specialists in this position can really take a lead.
Thank you. And seeing no further questions, Senator Kunesh, do you have any further comments before we take a vote?
No, I just feel this really is an important position that has been long time either neglected, and even though you might not hear anybody say yay or nay about this, sometimes you don't know what a valuable asset, and if nobody is saying no, then that might be an indicator that there is a positive effect to this. So,
Madam
thank
Chair,
you.
Thank you. Senator Anderson?
I'd like to know if there's a fiscal note for this bill.
Mr. Anderson?
Madam Chair, Senator Anderson, there's not a fiscal note that's been requested yet. There's no cost to state government, so it wasn't for this committee to request one. It looks to me there's no appropriation section, so my understanding would be that if this passed as is, the department would be expected to absorb the cost within their current appropriation. But if this is heading to education finance, they may have different intentions.
Madam Chair, is this
Thank you,
heading
Mr.
to-
Erickson. Senator
is this
Anderson?
heading to finance, education finance?
Yes, Senator Anderson, it is.
Thank you.
With that, Senator Swedzinski moves that Senate File 3471 as amended be recommended to pass and re-referred to the Education Finance Committee. Roll call has been requested. Could you please take the roll?
Chair Mitchell,
Yes.
Chair Dietzick,
Yes.
Senator Anderson,
No.
Senator Barr,
No.
Senator Carlson,
Yes.
Senator Swadzinski.
Yep.
Senator Drazkowski,
No.
Senator Fateh,
Yes.
Senator Gustafson,
Yes.
Senator Jasinski,
No.
Senator Haran,
No.
Senator Lang,
No.
Senator McQuaid,
Aye.
Senator Morrison.
Aye.
With a vote of there being 8 yes and 6 no, the motion prevails, and Senate File 3471 as amended is passed and re-referred to the Education Finance Committee. Thank you. And Senator Kunesh, if you could please also proceed with Senate File 3474.
Okay. Back on track we are. Yes, I have before you Senate File 3474, which would create a Digital Citizen Internet Safety and Media Literacy Advisory Council, and I have 2 amendments for you.
Thank you. Senator Gustafson offers the A2 amendment. Senator Kunesh, do you have anything to say regarding the A2 amendment?
No, this basically, it just expanded the committee by 4 so that there are 2 people with expertise in computer science education and 2 representatives from school districts with expertise in student information systems and data privacy issues. And then there is a blank appropriation on this one.
And council says it also would change some deadlines.
Oh, yes, it does. It changes the deadline. Yes, there's 1, 2, 3, 4 different dates that would change.
Thank you, Senator. Again, Senator Gustafson moves the A2 amendment. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. The motion prevails. Senator Kunesh, could you please explain the A3 amendment?
Yep. And this also changes that membership from 21 to 23 by adding 2 school district technology directors, and then rearranges the numbers.
Council has a comment.
Okay.
Madam Chair, Senator Kunesh, it looks to me like the A3 is incompatible with the A2. It's changing some of the same things. In the A2, we went from a 21-member group to a 25-member group, and so then with the A3, it changes it to a 23-member group.
I will withdraw the A3.
Thank you, Senator Kunesh. Senator McQuaid withdraws the amendment. Thank you, Senator McQuaid, for your work. With that, Senator Kunesh, would you please proceed with your bill?
Yes, so Senate File 3474 is all around digital citizenship. We hear all the time about our kids being on their phones, on their computers all of the time, the things that happen, inappropriate messages going back and forth, bullying happening. Those are some of the things that are addressed under digital citizenship. And so Minnesota schools currently lack any kind of standards or curriculum for teaching essential 21st century digital literacy skills, resulting in disparities across the state as to the scope, standard, and teaching responsibilities. Recommendations by this committee would provide critical information to ensure that Minnesota's K-12 students have the skills to effectively use technology and the knowledge to do so safely and responsibly. Digital literacy for students supports educational progress, increases online safety, promotes the understanding of digital responsibility, it improves digital equity, and supports lifelong skills. Digital literacy is essential for college-level research and academic integrity, and this advisory council will help ensure the transferability of skills as students move from high school to higher education. I think it's really important to also understand that Minnesota ranks at the bottom of all 50 states in technology skills. And part of that is because of outdated technology standards that we are or are not teaching our students, and also the lack of understanding the very strong significance of that. And so what I would like to do here is to create that Literacy Advisory Council to provide the kind of guidance that our students need and our school districts are looking for.
Thank you, Senator. And there are two testifiers. First, virtually, Ms. Swenson, could you please again state your name and position for the record and then proceed with your testimony?
Sure, will do. Sarah Swenson, Media Specialist, Edina High School. Again, my 25th year of being the media specialist at Edina High School, and I'm also a national board certified teacher. And thank you again for your historic support of school libraries in last year's legislative session. I'm here today to ask you for your support of Senate File 3474, the creation of a Digital Citizenship, Internet Safety, and Media Literacy Advisory Council. Recently, the news show 60 Minutes had a story on misinformation on social media sites. Reporter Leslie Stahl introduced the story by saying, as big tech firms wrestle with how to keep false and harmful information off their social networks, the Supreme Court is wrestling with whether platforms like Facebook and Twitter, now called X, have the right to decide what users can say on their sites. This news story illustrates the importance of creating a Digital Citizenship, Internet Safety, and Media Literacy Advisory Council. The recommendations made by this committee will provide critical information to assure that Minnesota's K-12 students have the skills to effectively use technology and the knowledge to do so safely and responsibly. The role of a licensed school librarian teaching these essential school skills is supported by the money approved last year, ensuring a pathway that all students and teachers are educated on these topics. I strongly support Senate File 3474 because it provides a framework for our schools and digital literacy. It supports educational progress, increases online safety, promotes the understanding of digital responsibility, improves digital equity, and supports lifelong skills. I hope you will lend your support to this bill as well. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. We also have online Ms. Hayter. If hopefully I pronounced that correctly, please state your name and affiliation for the record, and then you can proceed.
My name is Rachel Hyder. I am the media specialist at Hastings High School. Madam Chair and members of the committee, my name is Rachel Hyder. I'm a licensed media specialist, and I'm also the president-elect of ITEM, the School Library Division of the Minnesota Library Association. I'm here today to seek your support of Senate File 3474. Many people take for granted that kids today are so good with technology, yet they don't realize that being adept at manipulating a smartphone or quick to record a TikTok is not the same as digital literacy and understanding key components to effective use of technology. Students may know how to locate information online for coursework, but they may not understand the ethics of citing sources and academic integrity. Students may be savvy at recording videos or editing images, but not know how to examine the credibility and bias of content posted by others that they view and then potentially share. Students may be able to post the perfectly angled Instagram selfie, but not realize that constant comparisons to friends and waiting for likes has led to the rise in teen mental health issues since 2012. As an adult that quite literally grew up with the internet as it was growing, I do remember those squeaks and squawks of dial-up internet and AOL Instant Messenger, which thankfully my parents in retrospect didn't let me have, much to my 13-year-old self's dismay. I did learn some key skills in those last 25 years, though, as the internet has grown up. I now closely curate who I follow and vet the media I interact with, checking for bias and misinformation. I have digital well-being timers set to combat the addictive nature of social media and that dreaded doom scroll. I take everything I see with a grain of salt and know that what I see can and probably is easily manipulated. Our students deserve to learn these same strategies to make them successful when using technology. The creation of the Digital Citizenship, Internet Safety, and Media Literacy Advisory Council will help ensure that every district in Minnesota has the same guidelines and to what tools and training should be provided to students. This committee seeks membership from a wide range of key stakeholders, including parents, educators at both the K-12 and the collegiate levels, experts in digital literacy and internet safety, among others. The recommendations made by this diverse group guarantees a comprehensive and scaffolded approach to the teaching and learning of digital literacy and internet safety critical to Minnesota's K-12 students and beyond. Thank you for your time, and please support our young people of Minnesota by moving Senate File 3474 forward.
Thank you for your testimony. Senator, anything else before I open it for questions?
No, thank you to both of the testifiers for outlining that so well. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, and as a personal comment, as a mother of a 7-year-old already asking for a cell phone because some classmates have it, I definitely see the need for these things. With that, any questions from the committee? Senator Barr.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The way, after the A2 amendment, this committee is going to exist for a whole 9.5 months. Has a sunset clause in here to expire on January 15th of 26, and the first meeting is going to be April 1st of 25. So I'm kind of curious what they're supposed to be solving in 9.5 months, and if they're only going to convene for 9.5 months, why isn't it just a working group? And then if it's a working group, why would you need an appropriation?
Senator Kunesh.
So within the 9.5 months, this group will create an advisory group that is going to come back to the legislature with those recommendations around education. Because of the expertise and the experience that all of these members that we have in here have listed here, we felt it was sufficient for us to hear from them. Maybe down the road, when we hear from them, if there is more work to do, we can expand it or extend those times. But as the Chair of Education Finance, we have a lot of people and a lot of organizations asking us to fund and support all these different digital literacy around technology and internet safety, all of those things. And we just want to hear from these groups to be able to begin to establish some kind of an idea of how we can make sure that our kids have the resources that they need within the schools system for all of the things that the library media specialists spoke about, not just internet safety, but also how to use the tools of the computer. And so we are looking for that feedback within that 9.5 months, and be able to perhaps take that into consideration as we develop some kind of a technology literacy program here in Minnesota.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Barr.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So this advisory group then is going to report to the Department of Education. I thought when you were just explaining that, you said they'd report to the legislature.
Senator Kunesh.
Yep, if you looked on line 2.7, by February 14th of 2025, the commissioner must report to the chairs and ranking minority members of the legislative committee having jurisdiction over kindergarten through 12th grade. So they'll report to the commissioner, and the commissioner will share with their findings with us.
Thank you. Seeing no further questions. Okay. I saw Senator Swazinski first. Oh, Senator Swazinski.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thanks, Senator Kunesh, for bringing this bill forward. It's a great idea, and it's a long time coming. So thank you for that. If I could make one suggestion, half-heartedly, but also in all seriousness, love it if the council, the advisory group, had a high school kid, a middle school, and a 7-year-old on it to get their feedback. But I'm sure if these 23 members are as professional and as dedicated as you are, I'm sure they'll reach out to those kids as well and hear what's going on from that middle school, high school, and 7-year-old point of view and perspective. So thanks for bringing the bill forward.
Thank you.
Thank you. My 7-year-old does have a lot of opinions about a lot of things. Senator Curran.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Senator Kunesh, the I've heard a lot of terms here, and you just kind of, I think you talked more about what I think your intent is. It's kind of the technology and digital literacy, which I don't think any of us would disagree with. But within the bill, to have another 25-person committee, task force, whatever we call it, it's been the trend to offload current responsibilities of the agencies who were created to manage each and every one of these tasks within here. In your opening statement, you talked about the schools, they lack the technology, or the Department of Education lacks the resources. Every single day they pick technological resources and or programming to teach every aspect of our curriculum all throughout the state. And so I don't see anything in here that isn't already a current responsibility. We've got technology people and all across the board. So I don't see anything new. What I worry about is, one, we don't have any terms for what is digital citizenship. We see that a lot, and I'm a little bit worried about what that looks like. I'm all in on digital literacy, safety. How do our kids interact? The chance of some of them ever being a future elected official with what they post, and we were all young and dumb, and thank God we didn't have cell phones and cameras when we were younger. So all of those things I think make a lot of sense, but what I don't see that in here, and I just don't see it in anywhere in there, and I don't see the definitions of digital citizenship. What is it? Is it good, being a good digital citizen, being a bad digital citizen? I have no faith that the current system will allow an unbiased approach to what we should do, what you should be as a good digital citizen. Now, digital safety, all those things, I don't see that in here. The other part we don't see is that Senator Swedzinski mentioned that, one, we don't have citizens or students in there. But we also don't have any reflection of a broad group of people that represent parents. They're equally as important in what you're teaching these kids at school. And everywhere we've seen, now that parents are participating, they're being carved out. We got 25 members listed here, and not one of them reflects a view or inclusion of a parent. Because he talked about, we need to include, we need to understand, and kind of take a survey of what's going on and how can we provide better advice. There's no parents in here. So I have a great concern with that. And so the other aspects of the bill, again, around technical resources, we have all those things. We just continually offload what our full-time agencies have a full responsibility to administer every single aspect of our education system. That's why we have the Department of Education. But I also, to lead on to, on the other bill we just talked about, we haven't heard a need outside of digital literacy and safety. I think that we could all agree on. But I rarely, when teachers, our school administrators, please tell me one thing where the Department of Education adds great value in any aspect of their teaching in the classroom. Not a single person has told me there's been any value. And so we ultimately then are also left then with local control. So we have to figure these things out. They're using many different resources to figure out how do we provide digital literacy. I just don't think offloading, again, the legislative process of what we do here onto a board, again, deferring the responsibilities of its full state agency, a very large state agency, who it was their original charge to manage all these responsibilities. Technology didn't just arrive here. And so to say that we need this in another full board, again, abdicates our responsibilities as legislators. And again, I don't have any trust that something run under MDE without parental support, inclusion, would come out with anything that would be useful to our local schools. So thank you.
Thank you. Senator Kunesh?
Well, there's nothing in here that says that classroom teachers can't be parents. There's nothing in here that says media specialists can't be parents. We have parent-teacher organizations. They can all be parents. Representatives from Minnesota Regional Library System, they can all be parents. Experts in digital citizenship and internet safety and media literacy, those can all be parents as well. So there's a lot of dual roles that I'm sure somebody that's interested in participating in this advisory council is going to bring to the council. And so I'm not too worried about not having enough parent voices in here, but at the end of the day, if the advisory council says we need to hear more from parents, then I would certainly hope that they would reach out to parents to discuss that with them. And just a quick definition of digital citizenship. It's a person who develops the skills and knowledge to effectively use the internet and digital technologies. These are the people who use digital technologies and the internet in appropriate and responsible ways in order to engage and participate in society and politics. Again, the school districts across the state have library media specialists, have technology experts, have all these different things, but there's nothing really coordinated. There's a real disparity between the districts. And so we don't know what we don't know. And this is an attempt to at least help us get our heads around and wrap our thoughts around how we can ensure that the students that we are teaching right now and into the future have that sense of digital citizenship and responsible use of technology and media.
Thank you.
Madam Chair.
Senator Curran.
Thank you. And Senator Kunesh, the digital definition, so where in the statute is that definition of digital citizenship?
Senator Kunesh.
I don't know that we have it in statute, but that is a general public definition.
Madam Chair.
Senator Curran.
Thank you, Senator Kunesh. That was my point, is that there's many different digital citizenship. We've seen great extremes all over the world of what that means, and then who decides what it is and how it's used. And so that's where I have the concern. If we had some definitions around it, then we would have some guidelines and some expectations that we could actually discuss. Right today, it's wide open, and so we don't have that. And then as it relates to the parent side, what those you described in here all appear to be those that are already receiving a government paycheck. And so I want the average citizen and parent who is not already involved and where their income isn't derived from a government resource. So that's what I consider. I don't discount or discredit that any and or all of them are parents, but we need to seek somebody that's outside of the current system and those funding it. So thank you.
Thank you. Senator Anderson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I know this isn't necessarily, we're supposed to be looking at the money, but I would like to know if there was a fiscal note in the Education Committee.
Senator Kunesh.
We haven't heard this in the Education Finance Committee.
So, Mr. Erickson, do you have a fiscal note for this?
Mr. Erickson and Senator Anderson, that is where this will be going, is the Education Finance Committee.
So, Madam Chair, Senator Kunesh, I have not heard again of people in my district asking for an advisory committee or some type of oversight on their situation with media or with internet or digital. There was nothing brought up when I met with my school boards about this kind of a need. So I'm very much concerned about putting into practice another advisory committee and not knowing what it's going to cost. I would just think that that's not necessary at this time. I would like a roll call, Madam Chair.
Thank you. A roll call has been requested. Senator Kunesh, seeing no. Senator Drazkowski.
Thank you, Madam Chair. In line with that discussion that Senator Anderson had, do we know if a fiscal note has been requested for this bill?
Mr. Erickson.
Madam Chair and Senator Drazkowski, a fiscal note has not been requested on this one yet. I think it'll happen when it goes to Education Finance. There's no cost to state government in here. So after this amendment goes on, the fiscal note will get requested for that committee.
Well,
Thank you.
Well, Madam Chair, I know there's a section in here on compensation. Is that not a state government expense?
Mr. Erickson.
Madam Chair and Senator Drazkowski, it's not an expense to the state government jurisdiction. The compensation would be done typically through who's ever organizing the council, which would be the Department of Education in this case. So that would be captured in their portion.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So Madam Chair, are we going to, can we be assured that fiscal notes are being requested for these bills? We're seeing them here again today. This is the second committee this bill has come to, the first Finance Committee that it has come to. Normally, when it comes to the first Finance Committee, it does have a fiscal note requested. That's the responsibility of the chairs of the committees and their staff. We've seen multiple ones this hearing here. We saw some last week where there were no fiscal notes, no local impact notes, or any types of efforts around them. How can we be assured that the due diligence is being done by the people that are supposed to be asking for this information, Madam Chair?
Mr. Erickson, could you please address that?
Madam Chair, I can try to address that. I suppose there's a number of ways that the requesting of fiscal notes proceeds. So typically, the way that I handle things, if things come into the committee and there's going to be costs at state gov, by default, as soon as that gets a hearing, we'll request a fiscal note. In one like this, where if I look at it, there's no obvious cost to state government, what I'll typically do is consult with fiscal analysts of the relevant committees, and sometimes what I'll hear back is, we know that the bill's going to be amended, don't request the fiscal note yet, wait till the bill's actually in the shape where getting a fiscal note is going to be a more helpful exercise for the committee that's going to be looking at the actual costs of the bill. At other times, we want to get a fiscal note going as quickly as possible, so even if it's not sort of the primary jurisdiction of the bill, we'll start getting something worked on. In this case, it's not one, I believe this went to education policy first. They took a pass on getting it started. Given that there's no state gov costs in it, it'll just get passed on to ed finance. Does that address sort of the question in there? I'm sorry if I missed a portion of it.
Senator Drazkowski?
Well, I think it does. And Madam Chair, I don't know. I've been through other sessions in this legislature, and by this time, fiscal notes have been traveling with the bills. And I just don't know why these are coming absent of fiscal notes. I would encourage the majority to reevaluate their request for fiscal notes and start to gather these in earlier so that the committees, including this one, has the ability to review that information when they come through. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Senator Drazkowski. Seeing no further questions, Senator Swazinski moves that Senate File 3474 as amendment be recommended to pass and re-referred to the Education Finance Committee. A roll call has been requested. Please take the roll.
Chair Mitchell.
Aye.
Chair Dietzig.
Aye.
Senator Anderson.
No.
Senator Barr.
No.
Senator Carlson.
Aye.
Senator Swadzinski.
Yep.
Senator Drazkowski.
No.
Senator Fateh.
Aye.
Senator Gustafson.
Yes.
Senator Jasinski. Senator Curran.
No.
Senator Lang.
No.
Senator May Quade.
Aye.
Senator Morrison.
Aye.
Senator Jasinski.
There being 8 yes votes and 5 no votes, the motion prevails. Senate File 3474 as amended passes and is re-referred to the Education Finance Committee. Senator Kunesh, thank you for your time here today. Senator Pappas, if you could please step forward. Members, we will be going to number 7 on the agenda, which is Senate File 4741. This is the first stop, and Senator Pappas, when you are ready, if you could please proceed.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members. I'm very happy to be back here in front of you again. Members, this is really about how important passenger rail is to the state of Minnesota. We have the second train to Chicago, which will start later this year. We have the Northern Lights Express that was funded last year with federal funds as a match, with future service to Fargo-Moorhead, St. Cloud, and Mankato. The state needs, however, to maintain operational flexibility, and currently Amtrak has a monopoly on passenger rail in Minnesota. While Amtrak is the most likely operator of future passenger rail service, it shouldn't be the only option. Current station agreements limit passenger rail service to Amtrak, which forces the state to use them and keeps the private operator from starting service. What this bill attempts to do is to address that Amtrak monopoly by providing third-party liability coverage to Ramsey County Regional Rail Authority for Union Depot, and could be applied to other train stations as service is added, for example, in Duluth, at the Duluth Depot. It requests that the state cover the costs between the county's insurance of $500 million and the federal passenger rail liability cap of $323 million. It would cover third-party activities associated with the passenger rail facilities like the track, the signals, the platforms at Union Depot, but not the building itself. State investment in passenger rail shouldn't result in additional financial burdens for local governments. And Madam Chair, that's a simple bill, and I have with me the Chair of the Ramsey County Board, Trista Martinson.
Thank you. Commissioner Martinson, would you please state your name and title for the record and proceed?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I am Trista Martinson, Chair of the Ramsey County Board of Commissioners, and thank you, Senator Pappas. This bill, really goes beyond Ramsey County being a long-term supporter of passenger rail and freight rail improvements that improve mobility for all residents and businesses. The county has led multiple passenger rail and freight rail studies that focused on improved capacity in and around Union Depot to facilitate the use of the premier passenger rail station in the upper Midwest. The county invested over $100 million of its own funds into the renovation of Union Depot, which saw the relocation of Amtrak about 10 years ago, in May in 2014. Union Depot is at the heart of Minnesota's passenger rail plan, providing the connection between the long-distance Empire Builder service and proposed service to Chicago, Eau Claire, Fargo-Moorhead, Mankato, and Kansas City. We have addressed the challenge around the monopoly of Amtrak. On March 19th, our board approved the agreements with Amtrak for the TCMC, or the second train from Chicago, to utilize the Union Depot. By taking an extra liability, Ramsey County removed the limits non-Amtrak trains, which is about 13 a year so far, and removed Amtrak as the exclusive passenger rail provider to the Union Depot. This extra liability includes indemnifying Amtrak for third-party liability up to the federal limit of $323 million. This additional policy is about $2.5 million annually. We are proposing a solution to this change in this bill. Ramsey County is asking the state to cover the difference between its insurance and the federal liability cap. The county will maintain $50 million and would exhaust this insurance prior to the state being responsible for any costs. The benefits to the state really allows for more than 13 non-Amtrak trains a year to access Union Depot, provides an opportunity to quickly and cost-effectively provide more passenger rail to more places throughout Minnesota by introducing the opportunity for competition. It provides a framework to assist other local government owners of passenger rail stations with liability that may limit passenger rail aspirations. It allows the state's passenger rail service to continue to utilize Union Depot, which received $8 million in county funds annually for its operation and maintenance. The county believes that the state should play a role in addressing this cost as the ability to have non-Amtrak trains serve from the Union Depot. Ramsey County, again, will continue to provide the $50 million in insurance coverage and the initial liability. Thank you. I'm here for any questions. I'm also joined today by our Deputy Public Works Director, Mike Rogers, if you have any technical questions.
Thank you. Members, any questions? Senator Barr.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So Senator Pappas, this is this is the insurance part, and you talked about a monopoly with Amtrak. Who would be running the competition to Amtrak?
Senator Pappas.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I will turn that question over to one of the witnesses.
Madam Chair?
Mr. Rogers, if you could please state your name and title for the record, and then proceed.
Yep. Mike Rogers, Deputy Director of Public Works for Ramsey County Multimodal Planning. So in many cases in this country, Amtrak is the sole provider of passenger rail. It's because they have the access to the track through the Surface Transportation Board. It's a federal requirement that was put in place when Amtrak was created. Recently, there have been private providers. One of the newest ones is Brightline, and they run service right now between Orlando and Miami on tracks that were owned by the Florida East Coast Railroad. They are also building new track between Palmdale, California, and Las Vegas, Nevada, to run that service as private. There are a number of other private entities that contract with states to run not necessarily an everyday type of service, but can operate more excursion services. So those would be opportunities as well. And the reason Amtrak is the sole provider is prior to on March 19th, our agreements with Amtrak to be in Union Depot gave them the ability to be the only provider based on the liability cap of $50 million for us, and then they picked up the rest to go up to $323 million.
Thank you. Senator Brock.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to make sure that we weren't going to have a state-run train competing with a federally run train and government competing against government, but this is opening it up for private business. I'm much more amenable to this if we can have some private business running the government train out of business.
All the testifiers are saying yes, it's private. Senator Cran.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And along those lines, but you mentioned the 13 trips or 13 per year visits to Union Depot that happened today or that are current. Could you tell us who's running those? Because you didn't describe anything that touched Minnesota in the last conversation with Senator Barr.
Madam Chair.
Thank you. Mr. Rogers, please.
Madam Chair, Senator, currently we are allowed up to 13 private trains a year. They're referred to as special trains, which just means Amtrak isn't running them. Typically what we have for those trains, we bring a couple in for our train days, which tends to be like a Twin Cities and Western train or a BNSF locomotive. We also have the Minnesota Transportation Museum brings in some trains. So they sit at the depot, people walk around, see them, see freight rail and passenger equipment. We also have Canadian Pacific's holiday train annually comes to the depot. That's run obviously by Canadian Pacific. We are going to be having another Canadian Pacific train later this year. It's called their Empress train, which tends to be a corporate train where they bring those in and out. We've had Union Pacific trains, whether it's their steam engine, the big boy, or some of their corporate trains as well. So we tend to get a lot of private freight companies. We tend to get North Pole Express annually, which is run by the Friends of the 261. So those are the types of trains we've been getting in and out, and a number of those have expressed a desire, particularly on the Friends of the 261, to say we'd like to add more trains, but we know that you're limited, or were limited until these new agreements came in. So it just provides an additional opportunity.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Matthews. And Madam Chair.
Senator
Ms. Fogg.
Cran.
So, but that's not how it was described in the original. Like we had 13. Those are really just special events passing through. The entire process here is to talk about the expansion of the passenger rail, and you listed that, you know, Amtrak has monopoly. Well, it's because none of them are viable without gross subsidies. And so I don't see any others. And even in your own description, what you talked about is very limited rail, private rail between very large, dense populations for which we have none. And so I'm struggling to understand the premise for it. I get the liability piece, but I don't see anything changing in an exciting manner that private development is going to come here and build out rail spurs to where. And so that's what I haven't heard. None of it was sold about that. It was specialty trains, and we all love the Canadian. I'm a Christmas guy, so the Canadian Pacific, love it. But it's implied that those were passenger rail opportunities for which we are here to discuss today. And so I'm a little bit worried that we're offloading more burden onto the state taxpayers, for which a rail system will not be developed. And so to spur and to get rid of the monopoly, I don't think that's true. So with that, you know, I'm not super opposed to it, but I also don't see the business case for it that it's going to suddenly spur rail service. So thank you.
Commissioner Martinson, please.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Senator, for the comments. I think what's important here is that the way we have negotiated these contracts to end the monopoly gives opportunity for the future. With the investment in passenger rail in the last legislative session in Minnesota and the potential growth for passenger rail, we wanted to make sure that we had the opportunity so that we weren't saddling future governments with the monopoly, and there's opportunity. These contracts go for decades when we sign them into contracts, so we worked really hard to do that because we don't want to have monopolies in Minnesota. And we're a unique place that Ramsey County actually owns the rail, which is unlike most places in the country. So usually the railroads own the rail, but in St. Paul, we actually own the rail. So it was really important to us to make sure that we signed agreements and agreed to liability at the federal limits so that there could not be a future monopoly. It's important for future business and the opportunity. We've had the 13 specialty trains so far because of the other monopolies of Amtrak, but we want to make sure we're building a system for the future. So thank you, Senator.
Thank you. Seeing no further questions, I've looked left and right like 4 times. Senator Anderson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. To the testifiers or to Senator Pappas, it says in here arising from rail-related incidents. Have there been something that's been happening on this rail line that you're concerned about or you're expecting to happen, that the reason for the bill?
Madam Chair.
Mr. Rogers.
There haven't been any incidents that we've had in the decade plus we've been operating. This is just to make sure that should something happen that goes over our $50 million worth of insurance coverage, we would have protection. And it's related to the third-party trains. So as Commissioner Martinson mentioned, that our current agreement prior to the 19th expressly forbid any other passenger rail trains other than Amtrak from coming in and only allowed the 13 special trains. With our new agreements, we've taken Amtrak out of approving special trains. We've taken off that 13 train limitation and taken off the exclusive use of the depot by Amtrak. So while we've had just kind of a limited number of trains in the past, this opens that opportunity long-term, gives the state a much better position of being able to negotiate, should it be Amtrak, should it be somebody else to run a train service, if there's a desire to bring it in. So we've been very fortunate to not have any incidents. We're a very low risk when we talk to London to go get our insurance, since that's where you tend to get railroad insurance. We have about a mile of track and we're very low speed. We don't have any freight service on our track at the depot. So we have been fortunate to not have anything, but again, it's whenever you talk to risk management folks, they think about the worst case, and that's what we're trying to protect ourselves from.
Thank you. With that, Senator Carlson moves that Senate File 4741 be recommended to pass and referred to the Judiciary Committee. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. With that, the motion prevails. Senate File 4741, it has passed and will be referred to the Judiciary Committee.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Next on the agenda is Senate File 4655. Senator Herr, if you could please step forward. And when you are ready, you can state your name for the record and proceed on your bill.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and members for giving me this time to hear Senate File 4655. Today we have Senate File 4655 in front of you for consideration. This bill is from Ramsey County that will allow the county to expand eligibility of its existing housing and redevelopment authority levy to better support diversify industry, communities, and emerging entrepreneurs through business programming. Madam Chair, as a member, Madam Chair member, I have an author amendment that would put this bill in shape.
Thank you, Senator Herr. I understand there is the A1 amendment. This is the first stop for this bill, and Senator Gustafson makes a motion to move the A1 amendment. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. The A1 motion prevails. Senate File 4655.
Yeah.
Sorry, proceed as amended.
Okay, Madam Chair, just a little background. The change here are a result of the county working with the city in Ramsey County to address city concern. And during the COVID-19 pandemic, our Minnesota County became an important lifeline to small businesses and community. And we, the legislator, were tasked with county with some federal COVID fund as a way to get money out to our small business, our business in general. The Ramsey County distributed $24 million in small business relief grant, including the $11 million in the state-funded business relief. Ramsey County proactively partnered with coalition of small business organization to ensure funding is efficient and adequate in distribution. Since that time, Ramsey County has been unable to continue to engage with small businesses in recovering and revitalization that both our small business community expects and our county city have been requesting. So this legislation will try to open that link again, a pipeline of support. And with me is my county commissioner, Mai Chong-Shang, will speak more about the bill and the work that they do. And also we have here as a staff at the Ramsey County, Mr. Josh Olson.
Thank you. Also, one of my district's commissioners, Commissioner Zhang, you want to proceed?
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee. Thank you so much, Senator, for supporting us in this and allowing us time to speak. Again, I'm Ramsey County Commissioner Mai Chong-Shang. I represent District 6. That's most of the east side of St. Paul. In 2021, Ramsey County launched its Economic Inclusion and Competitiveness Plan, focused on affordable housing, redevelopment, and economic development. One key action for activating the HRA levy was in 2022, which made Ramsey County come up to parity with other metro counties, since we were the only county that did not levy for our HRA. We've made strides in affordable housing and community projects, but some of our economic competitive inclusion strategies still lack resources. And that's particularly with business support in terms of retention, expansion, and attraction. This legislation aims to expand HRA eligibility to include business programs without impacting our property owners, so it's not creating a new tax levy. Ramsey County remains committed to affordable housing and also seeks flexibility to address the needs of our small businesses throughout Ramsey County. So funding will align with spending directives where we would achieve parity between St. Paul and our suburban Ramsey County cities. We've engaged with city leaders and have incorporated their feedback into the amended bill before you. So this clarifies that cities will have a choice to opt into enhanced business programming. Again, thank you so much for the time and consideration. I'm here for any questions, as well as our Director of Community and Economic Development, Josh Olson.
And Mr. Olson, did you have testimony, or are you just here for questions? Okay, thank you. Members, are there any questions?
Thank you, Ms.
Senator Curran, or I'm sorry, Senator Anderson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have a letter in this packet from Mr. Koochiching, who is saying that this bill was proposed in 2016, and now it's being brought back, but with different language in there. Can you explain why the bill was basically not gone forward back in 2016, and now it is here today?
Senator Her.
Madam Chair, maybe I should defer that to Mr. Josh Olson.
Mr. Olson.
I'm not aware of the 26th.
And since this is your first time on the record, please state your name and affiliation.
Madam Chair, thank you, Senators. Josh Olson. I am the Director or Interim Director of Community Economic Development for Ramsey County. I think the central difference between 2016 and today is two parts. One, Ramsey County did go through the process through activating its Housing and Redevelopment Authority levy. Back in 2016, the county had not done that. And so I think the central difference was a major concern that this would create a taxing authority in 2016. Since the county is already at this point levying taxes for those services for affordable housing and redevelopment, what we're asking through this legislative change is to just broaden it to add business support. I think the other part to the letter here is associated with some changes that were made within the amendment, which there was a question by our city leadership asking if this is a tax, a new tax, or an angle to get a new tax, and the answer is no. We're just using the existing HRA levy, not creating an EDA levy, and we've made that clear within this updated bill language.
Thank you. Senator Anderson?
Thank you, Madam Chair. According to this letter, this bill is going to have a negative effect on Senator Gustafson, Senator Kunesh, Senator Marty, Senator Zhang, Senator Mitchell, Senator Umu verbatim, and none of these co-authors are on the bill. And again, it reflects back on the concern for Ramsey County being able to raise regressive property taxes. You said that it's not, but it's from what he's saying that these regressive property taxes will affect suburban cities surrounding within Ramsey County, and will have a better outlook for businesses. And so I'm just quoting from what the second page says, and I'm just looking for someone to refute that.
Mr. Olson. Mr. Senator Her.
I didn't get this letter beforehand, so this is the first time I seen and right in front of me here to Senator Anderson, and I appreciate your concern. And I'd like to know more the person that's writing this letter and who they represent. That's what my question is. But I appreciate the letters that have been sent to us.
Senator Her, we'll make sure you get a copy of this letter, and the intention would be to lay this over for possible inclusion. So of course there would still be an opportunity to work on this bill and get those questions addressed. Senator Anderson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So are these bills that didn't meet deadline, last Friday's deadline, are they going to have to go to rules to be looked at for possible passage?
Mr. Erickson.
Madam Chair and Senator Anderson, it depends on what happens with the bills. A bill will be marked late when it receives a committee report. So if it's laid over, there's nothing to mark late. Each committee is also allowed one late finance omnibus appropriations bill that would not be marked late and would be heading to finance. So the answer to your question will be in what situation we see this bill down the road. If it is wrapped into some sort of policy omnibus bill, it is likely that that bill would be passed out and then have to go to rules. If it's part of an omnibus appropriations bill, it would not.
Thank you.
Thank you. Senator Cran.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair and Senator. Doesn't the Ramsey County already have the ability to create its own EDA without state legislation?
Senator Her.
Like to defer to,
Mr. Olson.
Mr. Olson. Madam Chair, Commissioners, yes, in state statute, there is the ability for a county to create an EDA. I think what we are achieving here is to follow local precedents with other counties who have taken this same form. I think the additional pieces that we've addressed some of the concerns around local participation or local requests to opt in. which I think is in line with what was the legislative intent of the EDA.
Madam Chair?
Thank you. Senator Cran.
And thank you. Is it Mr. Olson? Yes. But you could have done it, and you could have then sought that local input. If everybody was excited about it, they would have gleefully joined. But looks like this just bypasses all the local input. And so you say they have the opportunity to opt in until they don't, right? There'd be nothing, what in the legislation would prevent them from you executing authority over them when it comes to levy? So you have the ability to, through your HRA today, to do levy. Can you use those levy for economic development? Through your HRA levy authority for economic development? Likely not, correct?
Yeah.
Okay, so then if you choose to impose then through your economic development, then additional levies, those cities will have the ability to opt in or out?
Madam Chair.
Mr. Olson.
Senator Cran, they are, with the exception of North St. Paul, because of the age of their HRA, all cities participate in the Housing Redevelopment Authority area of operation in Ramsey County. Right now, those eligible uses of activities are limited to affordable housing and redevelopment, and all of our communities participate in that programming right now. The difference here, and this is where the amended language plays in, is that cities can choose whether to participate in that business programming specifically. So if they choose not to, they will still be afforded the opportunity to participate in the standard suite of programming in affordable housing and redevelopment.
Madam Chair?
Senator Cran.
Mr. Olson, so if you choose to exercise your EDA levy authority, cities will have the ability to opt out of that and new taxes that you'd impose?
Madam Chair.
Mr. Olson.
Senator Cran, it does not, it's not that specifically. So where it's purely on the opt-out of the programming, not opt-out of the actual property tax levy of the HRA. And so I want to call out the singular pieces that this is an opportunity to expand the eligibility of the redevelopment authority and their service and their offerings. The reason why we sought the Economic Development Authority angle is that is what our legal counsel had suggested the route to go. And that's, again, fairly on par with what other local counties have done. The critical difference with those others is that they have a community development agency. So we do not have that, and the county has not expressed an interest in creating a community development agency.
Thank you, Mr. Olson. And Madam Chair, last comment. So what we normally find, because normally the process is pretty clear down here, everybody's a champion, especially local government, of sending us a list of supporters. And all of your cities, we haven't heard one. We don't see one of them. Not one of them has testified, and not one of them has sent a letter or a coalition of groups to support it. So to say that, well, the cities are on board, and then you come to the state to have heavy-handed authority to impose it upon them, to me, it just seems like it's a wrong process of inclusion of the cities that operate within Ramsey County. So for that, I think you should go back to the process of engagement and use the authority you have. You don't need it from the state. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Senator Anderson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Again, going back to this letter that was written by that gentleman from Roseville, it says here that the House version, which was Senator Lee, or I should say Representative Lee's bill, was asked for a hearing, but the day before the hearing was supposed to come on, the hearing request was withdrawn and the hearing for his bill did not go forward. Is that correct?
Senator Herr.
Thank you, Chair Mitchell, and thank you, Senator Anderson, for your question. The dynamic of it, I don't have the detail of it, but we have bills that are heard here, and sometimes we, due to circumstances, we withdraw bills. So we can't. I would not necessarily speculate that is a controversial or conflicting of the language in any way, but perhaps there are other elements that are part of it.
Thank you, Senator Herr.
Madam Chair?
Senator Anderson.
Thank you. So I guess I would piggyback on what Senator Coran said, that this bill has got some major problems here, and I would suggest that Ramsey County go ahead and create their own EDA rather than coming to the legislature.
Thank you, Senator Anderson. Senator Herr?
I just have word that it was referred to the wrong committee. That's why they're working in the House, and that's a different body, so, you know, it's out of our jurisdiction, and so I prefer we focus on this body.
It's hard to keep track of everything going on in our own body sometimes, much less everything going on in the House. So it sounds like it was just referred to the wrong committee. Thank you for that clarification. Senator May-Quade.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm not familiar with this part of statute, so I'm just going to ask some basic questions. Can you tell me where the opt-in, opt-out language is, or what is kind of the language that allows that to happen?
Mr. Olson?
Madam Chair, the opt-in provision is located, it's within the amended language here. There's a reference to a particular legislative subdivision. It reverts back to, just to point folks back to it, that's where it's connected within the EDA legislation, or the creation of the quote-unquote committee that Senator Coran mentioned earlier, that route. So what we were doing is just bringing that forward, and that local request or to opt in back into it, because there was a question whether that applied or did not apply.
Thank you. Senator May-Quade?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And then, so is, with the amendment, does that also cover all of the, like, the county has all the powers and duties of a city language that's found throughout here, is that they would have to opt into that, not just the programming, but also the authority as well?
Mr. Olson?
Madam Chair, I think that language is fairly, it kind of passes through many of these sections of the bill where there's discussion of what a county board is and who the chair is versus what a city council and a mayor. So I think that language is, I'm not an attorney, but that was a language that flowed through, and it's just kind of a standard language within most of these bills, as I understand it.
Thank you. Senator Barr?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I'm looking at your amendment here. Line 1.5, and it says the amendment is page 1, line 19, before the period insert, except for section 169-1082 subdivision 5. And when you look at subdivision 5, that's the city opt-out clause. This is an area of operation within the county economic development service. Provider shall include all cities. The city or township may adopt a resolution electing to withdraw participation. So if your amendment is except for that, and where it's going, this section does not apply to Ramsey County. Well, if that section doesn't apply, doesn't that preclude cities and townships within the county from opting out of the EDA?
Madam Chair, I would defer to Mr. Olson, but my thought that there's the section subdivision number 5 is permissive from my language, but I'll let
Mr. Olson
answer that.
Madam Chair, I think I need to kind of revert back to what our intent here is, and that is to provide the vehicle for our...
Mr. Olson, if I could, we can phone a friend and go to one of the attorneys. Ms. White.
Madam Chair and Senator, so the language on 1.19 as amended by the amendment says that 469-1082 does not apply to the county except for subdivision 5. That does apply. So that
does apply then?
Yes.
Okay,
so that
good.
gives the cities and townships the option to opt out.
Thank you for the clarification. Madam Chair, did anybody request a roll call?
This is to be laid over.
Oh, all right, great, thanks.
And see no further questions. Senate File 4655 as amended is laid over for possible inclusion. Thank you all. Senator Herr, if you could stay. And up next, we have Senate File 4493. If you can present that at your convenience.
Thank you, Madam Chairs and member. Senate File 4493. This is a MPCA proposal. It combines together two agency bills that's been heard in the Environment Committee, but the most important part is the rulemaking. That's why the bill is traveling here. Section 1 of this bill directs the agency to use good cause exempt rulemaking to make a small change to existing solid waste rules. One additional sentence is needed to ensure that landfill are properly managed after closing in order to protect the environment and prevent contamination that could harm the resident of Minnesota. And Section 2 directs the MPCA to use expedite rulemaking to conform its rules with changes to the capital assistance program, which were passed into law last year. So Mr. Johnson from Minnesota Pollution Control Agency is here to go through the bill or answer to any question that you may ask.
Mr. Johnson, do you have testimony, or are you here for? Mr. Johnson, please proceed. State your name and affiliation for the record.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members. For the record, my name is Tom Johnson. I'm the Director of Government Relations for the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency. So thank you, Senator Herr, for authoring the bill for the MPCA. I just wanted to provide the committee with a little background on landfill permitting to set the context for the bill. For this Section 1 post-closure care piece, when a landfill stops accepting waste, it goes through the closure process and takes steps to encapsulate the waste with actions such as installing a final cover. All of that needs approval by the MPCA. The stage after closure is referred to as post-closure care. Per Minnesota rules, landfills must continue to operate and provide a minimal level of care for at least 20 years. Usually that's the leachate and gas collection systems and monitoring environmental conditions like groundwater with the goal of moving the landfill from active management to a state where continued management is no longer needed. So if after 20 years active management of the landfill is still needed, the commissioner already has the authority to extend the post-closure period. But where the bill comes in here is it would clarify existing rules that before a landfill leaves that post-closure care, it must be approved by the MPCA. So no new requirements are proposed for closed landfills. The MPCA would add one sentence to the post-closure care rules, which simply says exit from post-closure care requires MPCA approval. This is in line with our other solid waste permitting actions where active approval is required by the commissioner. Those decisions to exit post-closure care should be driven by the protection of the environment and human health, not just meeting a 20-year period. So that is the purpose of Section 1. Section 2, as Senator Herr mentioned, is just conforming our rules with changes that were already made in the legislation that was passed last year and signed into law. So those are no interpretation needed for those either, which is why we're requesting good cause exempt in Section 1 and expedited rulemaking in Section 2. Happy to stand for questions. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you for your testimony. Members, the intention for this and actually the rest of the bills on the schedule for today, which are 6 more after this, would be to lay them over for possible inclusion. Are there any questions? Senator Anderson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Senator Herr, and to your testifier, the use of expedited rulemaking kind of leaves the public out of the equation here as far as having them to be able to testify on behalf of this legislation or behalf of the rules going forward. And I'm wondering if there's a reason for that.
Director Johnson.
Proceed.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So the reasoning behind this is that there is no interpretation of law needed. The laws have already passed. Statute always takes precedent. We are just conforming our rules with what the legislature has already passed. So the opportunity for public input has already happened through the representative process of the legislature.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson.
So, Madam Chair.
Senator Anderson.
So is there a reason why we just can't have regular rulemaking rather than expedited rulemaking?
Mr. Johnson.
Madam Chair, it would add an additional expense for, we're conforming our rules with changes that have already been made, and therefore any public input on that change would likely be moot. We have to follow the statute, and there's no interpretation of law occurring there.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. Senator Curran.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And Mr. Johnson, but you described the need for it. What in your opening statement was landfill closures and those types of things. None of those things happen abruptly. You're typically given great notice. So rulemaking, again, I know you keep referencing back to what we've already done or what's already been done, but you can understand for us, the rulemaking process isn't as transparent or available to people that it should be today under the regular rulemaking, more or less the expedited. And we've just seen the trend all throughout this legislative session that we're granting open-ended rulemaking. When you look at, may use under the good cause exception, right? There's very few things that you couldn't justify under that. And so to me, it just looks like more rulemaking authority granted to bring anything into the process to write law without the legislature or input through the rulemaking process and, for some transparency. So that's what gives us great pause. In your description was, well, those things occur and we need this. Well, you already have the ability, you have great notice to use regular rulemaking. Yeah, it may be costly, but the very few opportunities people have for input, they should get it. Government's been so unresponsive and not transparent that we should be informing everybody in every step of the way. And I know there's changes in the rulemaking process or some technology is going to improve that, so we'll feel better that people can participate. But that's what our apprehension is about supporting these types of things, is without clear definition, just leaves the agencies out to write law without us. So that's our apprehension. So thank you.
Thank you, Senator Curran. Seeing no further questions, Senate File 4493 is laid over for possible. Senator Herr.
I certainly don't want to change subject that much, but this is a process that we go through, and the hearing, we already hear this in the Environment Committee, so this is a process that we go through to have confirmed rulemaking, and citizens already had people already had their input. But on a similar matter, if we really need to have citizens engage, all power to reinstate the Citizenship Board. That's what we want to go for. So I just want to make that point before I submit to you to lay over this bill.
Thank you. And I know Mr. Johnson also referenced that. So Senate File 4493 is laid over for possible inclusion. Thank you so much, gentlemen. Members, we will now go back to what was the second bill on the agenda, or item 3, Senator Hauschild, and Senate File 3753. He will be joining us remotely.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Can you hear me?
Yes, please proceed.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members. Today I have for your consideration Senate File 3753, a bill regarding the Northern Koochiching Area Sanitary District. The bill before you today changes the makeup of the board that oversees the sanitary district. The changes update the composition of the North Koochiching Sanitary Sewer Board by striking references to districts that never existed, for example, paper makers, and a district that no longer exists due to annexation, which is the South International Falls District. In Section 3, the district membership is reconfigured to consider the updated districts. This section requires the board to appoint a new at-large member by a majority vote. I've spoken to local officials and stakeholders throughout Koochiching County who are all supportive of these needed changes. Today I have with me Callie Briggs, the Executive Director of the North Koochiching Area Sanitary District, who can testify to what these changes are and why they're needed. Thank you for the time.
Ms. Briggs, can you hear us?
Yes.
Please identify yourself for the record and continue with your testimony.
Okay. My name is Callie Briggs, and I am the Executive Director for the North Cooch Area Sanitary District. I'd like to say thank you to Senator Hauschild, Madam Chair, and committee members. Enabling legislation set up in the early 1980s formed the North Koochiching Area Sanitary District with 9 members. International Falls 4, South International Falls 2, East Cooch 1, City of Rainier 1, and Papermakers 1. Later, Papermakers dropped out because they did not have sewer, and still to this day do not, making North Cooch Area Sanitary District an 8-member board. In 1989, South International Falls and International Falls consolidated because of a drop in population. At that time, International Falls acquired South International Falls' 2 spots on the board. They now dominate the board with 6 representatives, while the other 2 districts have 1 representative, making up the 8-member board. North Koochiching Area Sanitary District Board, representing all districts, respectfully requests a change in legislation, creating a more balanced board with International Falls having 3 representatives, East Cooch having 2, Rainier having 1, and 1 at-large member that is chosen by the board, creating a 7-member board. East Cooch is a district governed by Koochiching County and has had sewer expansions in 2007 and 2018, doubling its sewer hookups. Thus the reason we are recommending they have another representative on the board. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Members, the plan is to lay this over for possible inclusion. Are there any questions? Senator Hauschild, any further questions before we lay this over? Or, I'm sorry, any further comment?
No further comments. Thanks so much for the consideration.
Thank you so much. With that, Senate File 3753 is laid over for possible inclusion. Senator Hauschild, if you could please stay with us and present Senate File 4108 at your convenience. And I'm sorry to interrupt. I understand this is your first stop, and do you want the A1 amendment moved?
Yes, please, Madam Chair.
Senator Carlson moves the A1 amendment. This is the first stop again. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. All opposed, nay. The amendment is adopted. Senator Hauschild, now that the bill is in the order you want it, please let us, please present.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members. Today I have for your consideration Senate File 4108, a bill that establishes a Minnesota Advisory Council on Infrastructure. The Infrastructure Resiliency Advisory Task Force, created last session, was charged with evaluating issues related to coordination, sustainability, resiliency, and federal funding on state, local, and private infrastructure in the state. The task force has identified a number of weaknesses and inefficiencies related to infrastructure across the state, and therefore this bill proposes the establishment of the Minnesota Infrastructure Board to rectify these issues. The board would be charged with defining and maintaining a vision for the future of Minnesota's infrastructure that provides for proper management, coordination, and investment. The board will work in a non-regulatory capacity and in tandem with stakeholders to develop and promote best practices that will preserve and extend the longevity of Minnesota's public and privately owned infrastructure. The board would consist of 14 non-voting members that are experts in an aspect of infrastructure and 11 voting members. The duties the board is charged with include, but are not limited to, identifying approaches to enhance and expedite infrastructure coordination across jurisdictions, agencies, state and local government, and public and private sectors, including in planning, design, engineering, construction, maintenance, and operations, developing an educational program on asset management, and writing an annual report to the legislature. Today, I do have two testifiers to speak to this bill. Thank you, Madam Chair, for your consideration.
Thank you. And first online, we have Michelle Stockness. Oh, I'm so sorry. Once you're settled, if you could please state your name and affiliation for the record.
Hi, thank you, Chair Mitchell and committee members. I'm Michelle Stockness, and I'm here as the chair of the Minnesota Infrastructure Alliance. And I also am a registered civil engineer with 20 years' experience as a water infrastructure engineer. So today, we're here in support of Senate File 4108 and the proposed Minnesota Advisory Council on Infrastructure. I'm representing today the Minnesota Infrastructure Alliance. We're a coalition of professional organizations striving to provide and maintain safe and sustainable infrastructure across Minnesota. Who we are more specifically, we're 19 different professional associations that represent infrastructure. Everybody from Rural Water, MnDOT, the Public Works Association, county engineers, utility contractors. There's 19 of us. I won't list them all, but my slides that I was going to present are in the meeting materials. We think that it's time to focus more on infrastructure in Minnesota. If you remember this ASCE report card from 2022, Minnesota got a grade of C. C is mediocre and requires attention. So we think we can do better with infrastructure in Minnesota. This signals quality of life to all residents in Minnesota, and it also is the backbone for our economy. So we'd love to see this report card grade go up. And we think the proposed Council on Infrastructure will help infrastructure in Minnesota. If you look at a report from the National Infrastructure Advisory Council last year, one of their top 5 recommendations was to increase cross-sector coordination, specifically for intelligence sharing and setting common standards. They say, and I quote, "The security and resilience of our critical infrastructure depends on collaboration across sectors, and significant barriers block effective collaboration." So we think that the proposed Minnesota Advisory Council on Infrastructure will help us better coordinate across units of government and across infrastructure sectors. And we think that this will help us better compile and communicate our infrastructure needs and priorities statewide. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your testimony. Mr. Mathis, could you please state your name and affiliation for the record and proceed?
Certainly. Good afternoon, Chair Mitchell and committee members. My name is Russ Mathis. I'm representing the American Public Works Association's Minnesota chapter. I'm the Public Works Director for the City of Eagan, and I've been a professional civil engineer for more than 30 years. So each of you are here today because you care about your community and this state. You were impressed, you were impassioned enough to invest your life in order to do what needed to be done to make Minnesota a better place to live, work, and play. I'm here today to help keep Minnesota as the better place we all want it to be as long as we can into the future. I participated on the task force with Senators Carlson and Jasinski that created this proposal, and I'm excited about the Minnesota Advisory Council on Infrastructure. I'll refer to it as the MACI as I continue to share comments. MACI will identify and recommend best practices that will preserve and extend the longevity of Minnesota's public and private infrastructure. We have almost an unimaginable infrastructure needs. Minnesota infrastructure needs proper management, coordination, and investment, and that is what the MACI will provide. As I travel in outstate Minnesota, I worry that some small towns may not be around in the future. Failing drinking water and sewage disposal systems may not allow some communities to continue. MACI may limit such failures and help coordinate flourishing communities. In Eagan, I looked out 100 years and saw that we would not be able to continue to provide safe drinking water and protect homes from flooding without making changes. I shared the concerns and a plan to address them, and the City Council made the needed changes. MACI will help guide such change for other communities. MACI will need funding to function. Funding would provide facilitation and project coordination. Without funding, MACI would easily become another committee of volunteers with only volunteer efforts to show. It is critical for Minnesota that Mackey succeeds. Your committee has jurisdiction over 2 Minnesota boards that issue licenses for certified public accountants and professional engineers such as Michelle and myself. With Mackey's leadership, this committee could help enhance these professionals' decision-making abilities to achieve the best infrastructure solutions at the lowest cost. Mackey can provide a clear line of sight to managing risk and extending the life of all infrastructure, ensuring good decisions are made for all Minnesotans now and into our future. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Senator Hauschild, anything further to say before I take questions? If you can just give me, I see a nod, yeah, no, or, okay. Members, do we have any questions? Senator Jasinski?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And again, I was on the committee, and we spent a lot of meetings over the summer, but one of my recommendations on people on the board was the Minnesota Chamber of Commerce. And for some reason, that disappeared at some point. I guess I just, we have everybody appointed by the governor. We have a member of the Senate and the House. We have no business people, nobody from the Chamber of Commerce to comment on what's going on. And that was my concern when I was on the task force. I asked for that to be put on there. It was in that meeting, and then somehow it disappeared. So why would we not have a member of the Minnesota Chamber talking about this as well? Because it does affect small businesses just as much as it does the public bodies. So why was that removed is my question.
Senator Hauschild.
Madam Chair, Senator Jasinski, I'm going to pass to one of my testifiers to see if they have the answer to that. I was not part of the group that you were a part of, so perhaps they might have some insight. And if they don't, I would certainly be happy to follow up with you and talk more about adding a chamber representative.
Madam Chair.
Madam Chair, we don't have any insight on that. I remember Senator Jasinski's suggestion to add it, and that was supported. But
Madam Chair.
Senator May-Quade.
Thank you, Madam Chair. If you look on line 4.29, the Minnesota Chamber of Commerce is listed as one of the many stakeholders whose consideration for appointment must be considered. And I want to note, too, that the members that are being appointed, nothing precludes them from being members of the Chamber of Commerce.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and Senator Quade.
Thank you, May-Quade. Senator Jasinski.
And I was pointed that out by staff, so thank you very much.
So, looks like that problem has been solved. Senator Anderson.
Madam Chair, is this bill going to be laid over?
Yes, Senator Anderson. As I mentioned earlier, all the further bills today would be laid over.
Laid over, okay. If the legislators are exempt from this, and I take it it's the governor that's making the appointments to this committee, is that correct?
Madam Chair.
Senator May-Quade.
Thank you, Madam Chair. If folks want to look on lines 3.8 to 3.14, the voting members are 2 members appointed by the governor, 2 members appointed by the Senate Majority Leader, 2 members appointed by the Senate Minority Leader, 2 members appointed by the Speaker of the House, 2 members appointed by the House Minority Leader, and 1 member appointed by the Indian Affairs Council. And then underneath that, 3.15 over to 4.3 are non-voting members who sit on the council, and then 4.20 to 5.3 are the recommendations for the appointment organizations that are stakeholders for their advice to be considered.
Thank you, Senator May-Quade.
Madam Chairman?
Senator Anderson.
Is the executive director then decided by the members of the committee, or is it decided by the governor?
Senator May-Quade, I really appreciate your thorough reading of this bill.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think Senator Hauschild did a really great job putting it together. Senator Anderson, was your question which members will be appointed by the governor?
Senator May-Quade, the executive director.
The executive director, I believe, was decided from the council itself, but thank you.
Our attorneys are
5.1
saying it might be appointed by the commission.
The council must elect from its voting members a chair or co-chairs and vice chair. So from the council, they will elect.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, if I may.
Council will reference the line so that you know where that is, Senator Anderson.
Madam Chair and members, part of this is in the A1 amendment, but the executive director is appointed or is hired by the Commissioner of Administration with the advice of the council. And that is in the amendment, that is the direction to line 7.13. So it is on, of the amendment, page 3, line 23 and 24.
Thank you, Council. Senator Barr.
Thank you, Madam Chair. If I could get council to help me out on this one. So I'm looking at the amendment, line 1, let's just go 122. We took out, this is for the compensation piece, and it's members will be compensated in accordance with 150481, and we changed that to 16B 356. And then when I went to look up that particular statute number, it wasn't listed. It came up blank. So what did I miss?
Council James.
Madam Chair and members, the references to 16B.356, 16B.357, 16B.358, and 16B.359 are references to the new statute sections that are established in the bill, starting on line 2.20. Right, the bill is introduced, labels that section 15.0481, but the amendment changes that section to 16B.356 and so forth for the next couple of sections. They're renumbered.
So we're just renumbering the statutes that we're referencing? I'm really confused here.
Council James.
Madam Chair and members, these are all new statute sections completely. And in the bill, when it was originally drafted, it coded these in new sections 15.0481 and so forth.
Right.
And now with the amendment, it's assigning a different coding to those sections.
Okay, thank you.
Senator Curran.
Thank you, Madam Chair. A couple questions, and so we've got 11 voting members and 15 non-voting members are basically agency personnel or their representatives, which at least is clear in who they can have fill in for their roles. But that the non-voting members have quorum or can establish quorum. It seems kind of odd that it wouldn't be voting members, since they're the most important people here. And that, so to me, could we have one voting member show up and along with enough non-voting members and still conduct business? Would that be possible? Whoever can answer that.
Senator Hauschild.
Madam Chair, I would ask if council could help with that question.
I have council looking at that. I just thought you might have the answer. Senator Cran, could you just restate the question one time to make sure?
It appears that the bill states that the quorum is full membership, the 11 voting and 15 non-voting members. At least that's what my notes say. And so if that's true, then, because it says, it appears that there are only 11 voting, so I would imagine quorum should be only of those 11 voting members and not the non-voting members.
Council James, I apologize. Council James, at your convenience.
Madam Chair, Senator Cran, can you point me to the quorum language in the bill that you're...
Madam Chair, it's off my notes, so I will look.
It's 520.
Madam Chair, when
Senator Cran.
our research looks for it, we can move on to another question in the meantime.
She found, she is going to look. What is your next question, Senator Cran?
No, we've got that.
Senator James has it. I'm sorry. Wow, there's a lot of back and forth. Council James.
Madam Chair, Senator Cran, you're right. The majority, that quorum counts both voting and non-voting members.
So the second part of the question was?
So, Madam Chair and Council, so
Yes.
a single member, voting member could be present and conduct business as long as 15 or a quorum of non-voting members are present.
Madam Chair, Senator Krant, that's correct. Of course, the non-voting members can't vote, so it's hard to imagine what business could actually be accomplished. But they could hold a meeting and take testimony, I suppose.
Madam Chair, but if just described that
Senator
if you have one voting member, wouldn't they then be, a quorum is established, and if a vote were to come up and no opposition, seems there's no other voting members, the law tells me that one person can show up regardless of what you believe they could do and pass it. Seems like a poorly written quorum and should only reflect the 11 voting members, the quorum, to conduct official business and take official votes. So Senator Hauschild or whoever wrote the bill, I would recommend that piece be changed. And then I can move on to another question.
Senator Krang, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So can somebody just tell what the, you know, we heard about we want the report card to improve. We understand the work, or at least the high level what was stated, but what's the product going to be? I know it says, hey, deliver a report to the legislature, but if the product also included a statement of, or one of the statements that were made about for public and private infrastructure. So help me understand how this committee is going to make a series of recommendations which all private sector seek out and seek guidance, and they do that pretty well in the free market. So could you guys describe to me what that means? What's the work product and how it's going to marry wonderfully the public and private sector infrastructure?
Thank you, Senator Krant. Before you proceed, I just want to, for the record, because we have closed captioning and people that might not hear, Council James did agree with Senator Krant's by nodding interpretation of the quorum issue. With that, if you could please proceed with the next question. Would it be Mr. Mathis?
Correct, yes. Thank you, Chair Mitchell and Senator Krant. In essence, what we're trying to do is enhance asset management efforts throughout the state of Minnesota, both publicly and privately, as well as coordination between efforts both in the public realms and in the private realms of infrastructure managers. So there is the amount of infrastructure that we currently have, both publicly and privately, in Minnesota is staggering. And I don't think any of us really have a good handle on what that is and what the needs are of that infrastructure and what the cost is for addressing the needs of that infrastructure. So this isn't a regulatory, a proposal for an additional regulatory agency. So it's going to be challenging for this entity, for Mackey, to have effects. So it's going to require partnerships with folks such as this committee and others. And as I mentioned as an example, just through the oversight that this committee has with the licensing of CPAs and professional engineers. Those are two entities that are intimately involved with asset management. I work completely, with the accountants at the City of Eagan for finance, as well as the engineers. And so it's a need that we see that is not being addressed currently. And so what the effort is proposing is that we enhance asset management and get it out in the forefront of the communities that are addressing infrastructure, as well as helping the general public understand what the needs are. That's a quick summary.
Madam Chair.
Thank you. Senator Krant?
Thank you, Mr. Matthews. And so, Mr. Matthews, please describe then how this government-appointed board is going to help a private business manage their infrastructure and assets more effectively than they currently do. That's what I'm looking for. What they do a pretty good job, right? When they fail, they go out of business. When government fails, it grows. And so tell me how you're going to effectively provide recommendations that a private entity hasn't already researched and understands for the mere survival of their business.
Mr. Matthews.
Madam Chair and Senator Krant. So I'll give you an example. The Michigan Infrastructure Council has been established, and it has its own website. What they've done there is they do a good job of collecting information about all the different infrastructure from the various entities that are operating in Michigan, both public and private, so that when one of those entities is going to do improvements to their infrastructure, they can see what the other infrastructure is in that general location that they have to coordinate with. We have Gopher State One Call is a resource that we have here, but the planning that it takes to go to coordinate millions of dollars that can be spent on infrastructure improvements. If you're familiar with any public improvements or any construction that goes on along any public roadway in Minnesota, there's a great number of entities that are located within the public right-of-way, under the roads and the boulevard adjacent to the roads. The challenges for coordinating the efforts that go on, and there's millions of dollars of infrastructure within short segments, and part of what we're trying to do is provide educational opportunities to enhance and have asset management champions, so that folks just aren't reacting to emergencies or issues that come up, but that they're actually planning ahead to make good plans for the infrastructure that they have responsibility for, so that they can make investments that will in the long term be cheaper in cost, but then also in coordinating so that a private entity that's located in a public right-of-way can have an easy way of communicating with other private entities as well as public entities, and so that they collectively can plan together to do those improvements. Just in the own city of Eagan that I work in, for years we've just been taking care of the streets, and all the pipes underneath the ground. We don't have any concerns for them. Well, reality is that those pipes are getting older, and they're going to need to be replaced. Well, it's the last thing I want to do is to go and tear up a street that needs to be replaced and replace it, and then 5 years later come back and tear up that street to replace a water main that I should have known was going to be failing pretty soon. And so that's kind of the coordination effort. And honestly, even from that's all things that I'm responsible for. So even managing my own stuff, it's challenging enough as it is. Just understanding what the conditions of the existing infrastructure is. Water main, that's a challenge. It's a challenge to understand how much longer water main pipe is going to last. So trying to coordinate that, educate folks that are maybe outstate and all they have enough staff to address is emergencies. And they're just constantly running from one emergency to another, to trying to provide them opportunities to plan for the future. And then in addition to that, working with private entities and public entities so we can all work together, because we're all serving the same customer, whether we're paying a private utility bill, Excel, or Dakota Electric, or whatever it is, or we're paying the city for the water that we drink. We're all the same customers.
Madam Chair.
Thank you. Senator Curran?
Thank you, Mr. Matthews. So at least there's some clarity on what private infrastructure you're speaking of. And the conversations, the Chamber of Commerce, right, implied that it's private infrastructure, private business, but not infrastructure, utilities, and all of those things co-located in a right-of-way. I got that. But there doesn't appear to be any barriers to that. It's pretty broad general statements about what the board and the authority has, not limited to just public infrastructure, right-of-ways, roadways, and all those types of things, private businesses. And so that could be pretty broad, and again, having another government entity put more burdens on our private business. So that helps. So I get one initial question, Madam Chair, is that, so the council's responsible for recommending best practices. Skip it. You got to submit an annual report to the governor and the legislature and their activities, an overview of the duties and requirements, and identify barriers to the council's work and provide recommendations. Could one of those barriers or recommendations that to then further add a regulatory role to this body?
Mr. Matthews?
Madam Chair and Senator Curran, you can ask your neighbors right there. The comments within the task force were very strong against this council becoming anything regulatory or having anything to do with any regulation. So that in itself will make it challenging for this council to have good effects or strong effects as you've indicated. But no, as far as the task force was concerned, there was no interest in this becoming a regulatory agency in the future.
Thank you, Mr. Matthews. Madam Chair, and thank you for the feedback. And again, a little bit worried again about another 26-member board talking about capital infrastructure. We already have a whole host and a pile of resources. I get the coordination. We all do that, right? The new street and the new repairs cut into the new street. But many of those are government entities all self-contained within themselves. So to say that this suddenly will improve and that you have to make recommendations, again, we have so many layers of government that are already in existence to do the very things that you are seeking to do. I, again, worry about why do we need another layer of unelected people over these positions or creating another set of recommendations. And then all those recommendations, if you don't become a regulatory body, will then become a regulatory issue in some other aspect within statute. So thank you. I appreciate your feedback and candor.
Thank you, Senator Cran. Senator Anderson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. On line 6.29, it talks about the legislative committees with jurisdiction to oversee capital investment, climate, economic development, energy, and transportation. What committee oversees climate?
Madam Chair.
Senator Hauschild.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Senator Anderson. I believe that would be the Senate Environment Committee.
Would it be better to have that in there rather than climate?
Council James.
Madam Chair and members, currently there are two Senate committees with climate aspects in their jurisdiction, the Energy, Utilities, Environment, and Climate Committee and the Environment, Climate, and Legacy Committee. And when we direct reports to committees with jurisdiction over topics, we don't identify the specific committee because the next legislature may choose to organize differently and have different committees. So we always just identify the topic.
Thank you, Ms. James. Senator Anderson.
Could Ms. James tell me on page 5 where it says subdivision 9, the compensation terms, removal, and vacancies according to section 15.0575, what are the terms of these people that are appointed to this committee? And who can remove them?
Ms. James.
Madam Chair and members, section 15.0575 is one of these filler sections of statute that we reference to fill in some terms. So the terms of these members will be for 4 years, and their removal is either by the appointing authority at either for cause after hearing in a notice or after missing 3 consecutive meetings.
So, Madam Chair, if a person doesn't agree with what's going on in the committee, the appointing officer can have them removed from the committee?
Ms. James.
Madam Chair and members, the statute section provides for them to be removed by the appointing authority either for cause after notice in a hearing or after 3 consecutive meetings.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think that this is another huge step in the direction that just expands government, and I know it's going to be laid over, but I think that there's a better use of our time than this. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Anderson. Senator Drazkowski.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Do we know if there's a fiscal note? I don't see one in the packet. Did I overlook it, or are we noteless again?
Mr. Erickson.
Madam Chair, Senator Drazkowski, there is a fiscal note. I don't know whether they're in packets. I can definitely send around a link with that.
Madam Chair, could Mr. Erickson just tell us what this bill spends in the current and the out biennium?
Mr. Erickson.
Madam Chair and Senator Drazkowski, absolutely. So the fiscal note, which of course was drawn to the bill is introduced and hasn't accounted for this amendment yet. identified costs for MMB of $56,000 in fiscal '25 to begin implementation, with ongoing costs of $192,000 for the council in fiscal '25, and then $653,000 and $768,000 in fiscal '27. Those are costs related to the executive director, to the space, to supplies and staffing, that kind of stuff. What I gather from the A1 amendment is that those numbers have been plugged into the bill on lines 1.15 to 1.20 of the amendment. I don't know whether those numbers will actually still be accurate to what the bill will need to be saying, given that I think MMB's role has been transferred over to the Department of Administration, but at least as a placeholder, it appears that those numbers are conforming to the fiscal note.
Thank you, Mr. Erickson. Senator Drazkowski.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Mr. Erickson. So it appears that on line 1.20, and thanks, Mr. Erickson, for bringing me to that in the bill, that we have over $1 million that are expected to be in the base in the out biennium. What is our target in the out biennium in this committee?
Mr. Erickson.
Madam Chair, I do not have the targets right in front of me. I think it was 2.5 million one time.
And the committee administrator is agreeing with that.
So Madam Chair, that is in
Senator.
the current biennium. Is that right, Mr. Erickson?
That is correct.
Okay, so how much in the out biennium, Mr. Erickson?
Mr. Erickson.
It's a one-time target, Madam Chair and Senator Drazkowski, so $0 in the tails biennium.
Okay, so Madam Chair, and thank you, Mr. Erickson. So $0 target in the out biennium, but the bill says it's going to spend $1.4 million in the out biennium. How do we rectify that, Madam Chair?
Mr. Erickson, if it was included, how would that be done?
So, Madam Chair and Senator Drazkowski, of course, those are our targets, and so the committee isn't bound itself by doing anything, but anything that spends money will have to go to the Finance Committee, and I assume there the Finance Committee, the chair, and the members there would probably force the tails spending to come out, or would have to probably revise the targets or have some sort of understanding of how that bill is moving out of the committee. But in general, the Finance Committee is the arbiter of the targets and enforcing those.
So we have a bill, Madam Chair, that doesn't fit our targets. Our target is 0, and this spends $1.4 million in the out biennium. And this bill's going to be laid over, Madam Chair?
That is the intention, Senator Drazkowski.
Okay, so Madam Chair, the bill would have to go will it be part of the omnibus bill here then? And at that point, I suspect that's when the Finance Committee will see the bill. Is that correct?
Senator Drazkowski, I'm not the person putting the omnibus together, so I cannot say what will or will not be included or where it might go from there.
Well, you're the chair, Madam Chair, so I'm asking you. Is there anybody else we can ask?
I'm sorry.
Oh, Stockness. I was going to say, since you're talking numbers, I don't know about omnibus bills, but in similar discussions in the House, the fiscal note was going to be revised with the move from MMB to the Department of Administration. So I do think those numbers are going to be lowered from what we've talked about before as a note.
Thank you.
So, Madam Chair,
Senator Drazkowski.
how, if the testifier says that these numbers are going to be lowered, how is this committee going to be communicated to about what that is? Is the agency just going to lower the numbers, or is the bill going to be changed substantively, or what happened in the House? What did they change, or did the agency just come up with some new numbers?
First, there's two parts to that question. So, Mr. Erickson, could you answer the first part, please?
Yeah, absolutely. So, Madam Chair, Senator Drazkowski, from a procedural standpoint, after committee, I'll request a new fiscal note based on the revised language. So that'll go out to the normal fiscal note distribution list and would be available publicly. I'm not sure that I can comment on what the lower body has done with the bill or the state that that's in, but perhaps the testifier has some more time.
Senator Hauschild, can you answer the second part, which is what the other body did?
Yes, Madam Chair, thank you, and Senator Drazkowski. The amendment that was introduced today brings it in line with what the House bill is. So it did change, the testifier mentioned, it changes the jurisdiction from MMB to the administration. So the hope is, as she mentioned, that that might reduce some of the costs. So when Mr. Erickson requests a new fiscal note, we'll be able to see the, what those numbers officially are. Certainly if this does get included in an omnibus, there certainly could be an opportunity for any amendments that would be necessary to clarify that.
Thank you, Senator Hauschild. Senator Drazkowski.
Thanks, Madam Chair. So another question for the author. So Senator Hauschild, so does this amount then in this bill, if it aligns with what the House did, does it amount to something more or less than zero in the out biennium?
Senator Hauschild.
Madam Chair, Senator Drazkowski, I think we need a new fiscal note to analyze this new amendment to determine what the possible costs are in the out years. I don't have a definitive answer on whether or not it's above or below zero.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Senator Drazkowski. Seeing no further questions, Senate File 4108 as amended is laid over for possible inclusion. Thank you, testifiers.
Thank you.
Senator Westrom, thank you so much for your patience. If you could please come forward, and when you are ready, Senate File 4991. And as you get settled, my understanding is there are not any amendments.
Madam Chair.
Go ahead.
Madam Chair, members, exciting stuff. I miss the days of state government committees, so good to be here. Members, Madam Chair, the bill, Senate File 4991, asked for a change in the hospital district board in Swift County. The Swift County Hospital Board, combined with the city of Benson in my district, is a 9-member board. They are asking to go to 6, and I will let my testifier explain just some of the recent changes in this hospital and the change in contracting with Centricare and who operates the hospital now, and the reason that the board doesn't need to be as big as it once was.
Thank you. I will go to the testifier. Mr. Anderson, who is joining us remotely, could you please state your name and affiliation for the record and then proceed?
Thank you, Madam Chair and committee members. My name is Dan Anderson, representing Swift County Benson Hospital. As Senator Westrom referenced, this change is being requested as a result of an agreement Swift County Benson Hospital entered into with Centricare, a healthcare system that provides services in rural areas of Minnesota. Through an operating lease agreement that was effective January 1 of 2023, Swift County Benson Hospital turned over operations of the hospital and attached clinic to Centricare. And with this change in operations, the vast majority of the duties and responsibilities that the hospital district board had also were transferred to Centricare. And so given that change of reduction in the scope of the duties of the board at their meeting in January of 2024, they made a decision to seek a reduction in the number of board members from the what is currently 9 to 6. Changing it to 6 would keep intact the 2-to-1 ratio between the county appointees and the city of Benson appointees. Really the main responsibility or duty that the board has now is to monitor the operating lease agreement with Centricare and ensure that Centricare is complying with all the requirements that are in that lease agreement.
Thank you. Is that the conclusion of your testimony? Okay.
Yes, unless there are questions.
Okay, thank you so much. Senator Westrom, any other comments before I open it for questions?
No, Madam Chair, I'd be happy to answer any questions if there is.
Thank you. Members, do we have any questions? Seeing no questions, Senate File 4991 is laid over for possible inclusion.
Thank you, Madam Chair and
Again,
members.
thank you for your patience.
Thank you.
Up next is Senate File 4183, Senator Fateh. And we have a number of testifiers on this bill. Testifiers, if you could please try to keep it to 1 or 2 minutes so that we can keep the committee moving along, I would appreciate it. Senator Fateh, when you're ready, please proceed.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Members of the committee. Today I'm presenting SF 4183, which is the Comp Plan Clarity Bill. This is a bill that will defend the Minnesota Environmental Rights Act, or MIRA, from misuse. MIRA is the cornerstone of our environmental law in Minnesota, but we need to add clarity to it to ensure that it is used to improve our environment and not harm it. The context of this bill is that the Minneapolis 2040 Comprehensive Plan has been halted due to a lawsuit. The 2040 plan is a landmark accomplishment that has been recognized across the country for reducing housing costs and reducing carbon pollution. But due to the lawsuit, the 2040 plan has been halted in its tracks. Projects that were already far along in the building process and that have spent tens of thousands of dollars were abruptly canceled and left in limbo. Thousands of homes that could be housing people have been halted. The cancellation of those homes is bad for our tax base, bad for our homelessness crisis, and bad for Minnesota. Last year, this committee heard the bill, SF 2159, which would have addressed this problem by exempting comprehensive plans from MIRA altogether. The bill before you today is a more narrow, compromise version that retains the ability for people to sue comp plans under MIRA, but clarifies that residential density by itself does not constitute pollution or impairments. At the same time, it formally adopts findings that we should act to reduce climate change and that we should prevent habitat destruction on undeveloped land. If you look in your packets, you will see a letter of support from 13 prominent environmental groups who support this bill because they know it is good for the environment. And you'll also find letters of support from a broad coalition of labor organizations, including SEIU, LIUNA, the Minnesota Building and Construction Trades Council, the Regional Council of Carpenters, CITUL, the Minnesota Pipe Trades, and Iron Workers Local 512. These organizations understand that this bill is important for both creating jobs and for keeping housing affordable for their members. You will also find letters of support from a variety of other organizations, including the Twin Cities Housing Alliance, Isaiah, Neighbors for More Neighbors, the Minneapolis Public Housing Authority, and the Minnesota Assistance Council for Veterans. They all understand that this bill is critical for addressing homelessness. Last year, we invested over $1 billion in housing, but that money won't be very effective unless we address the barriers that are preventing houses from getting built, housing from getting built. And this is just not a Minneapolis issue. Any city in the metro could be sued on the same basis that Minneapolis was. This is why the League of Minnesota Cities, the Association of Metropolitan Municipalities, and the American Planning Association are strong supporters as well. And with that, Madam Chair, I'll pass it to the testifiers.
Thank you. Testifiers, when I call you on deck, if you could actually come up and sit so that we can just kind of keep this moving as quickly as possible. And while you're waiting, remember to sign in, please. So up first, we have Mr. Wejnius, and then on deck in the chair, Mr. Johnson from League of Minnesota Cities. In between those will actually be Ms. Bean, who is virtual. If you could please state your name properly, because I'm sure I butchered it, and then your affiliation for the record, and then you may proceed.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm Peter Wagenius, Legislative Director with Sierra Club. We've submitted in your packets a letter from the 13 environmental organizations in support of this bill. Our support is grounded in research about how city populations relate to the environment. Cities in our metropolitan area, cities that lost population in post-war decades, have now been restoring their populations in the last 2 decades by adding housing units. Despite all this recent success, at least 11 cities are still underneath their previous peak populations. They should not be prevented from making further progress by allowing new housing. When they are able to do so, those cities are also helping to reduce climate pollution. The number one source of climate emissions is transportation. Our land use policies force more people to drive longer and longer distances. MnDOT ranked land use patterns as the most impactful on VMT, vehicle miles traveled. That's just one of several reasons why how we grow makes a huge impact on how much we collectively pollute. This is not new information. We've known that destroying more and more natural and undeveloped lands is hugely detrimental to the environment. We also know that per capita geographic distribution of carbon dioxide was mapped as far back as 15 years ago. More recently, the New York Times published a map of climate emissions showing where folks were able to pollute less or where they were forced to pollute more. And it just so happens that those cities that are able to pollute the least correspond very directly with those 11 cities that are still underneath their peak populations. We should let those cities restore their peak populations, and when we do so, it is beneficial to the climate. It is far better for the environment to allow those cities to restore their population rather than destroying additional farmland and natural spaces and exacerbating metropolitan sprawl needlessly. This litigation has gone on far too long without resolution, and it now threatens cities across the metro area. The legislature needs to provide clarity on comp plans in a way that is grounded in the reality of climate emissions and also how comprehensive plans work. We can do that and also protect MIRA, and this compromise language does both.
Thank you. Up next, virtually, is Ms. Bean, and if Mr. McConnell can come and take the seat in the meantime. Ms. Bean, state your name.
Thank you. I'm Peggy Sumihi Bean. I'm the president of the Minnesota chapter of the American Planning Association. A big thank you to Senator Fateh and you, Chair Mitchell, and members of the committee for the opportunity to testify. Our chapter represents 900 planners and planning commissioners from across the state of Minnesota. Though the Metropolitan Land Planning Act, the legislature has required municipalities throughout the 7-county metro to prepare comprehensive plans every 10 years. By law, these plans must develop sustainable solutions and strategies to prepare for population growth as forecasted by the demographers at the Met Council. These plans are documents that apply best practices from a range of environmental and planning disciplines. They are also documents that articulate a community vision formulated through extensive public outreach efforts. It's critical to understand that comprehensive plans are high-level integrated visioning documents. They are not mandates, and they are completely different from formal development proposals. This is why the state legislature explicitly exempted comprehensive plans from environmental review in the Minnesota Environmental Policy Act. We are here today, however, because the omission of similar language in the Minnesota Environmental Rights Act has created a major problem for cities and towns in the metro and perhaps the entire state. A lawsuit filed against the most recent Minneapolis Comprehensive Plan that relies on this omission has created confusion and concern amongst planners. A current court order creates a precedent whereby any comprehensive plan can be forced to undergo an environmental review through an EIS or an AUAR. This is unworkable. In Minnesota, these two types of environmental reviews are intended to be extremely detailed reports on specific projects with a knowable and discrete scope of work. The way they are formulated in this state, they cannot, and despite misleadingly presented counterexamples you may have heard from non-experts, they have not been applied to a generalized and speculative document like a comprehensive plan. This is an apples to oranges situation, and planners cannot make orange juice from apples. We are asking the legislature for your help to solve this dilemma. The time is now to act because preparation for the next decennial comprehensive plan cycle has already begun. While the legislature may justifiably be wary of intervening in ongoing litigation, it must weigh that concern against the reality that this litigation itself threatens to intervene in the state-mandated mandated work of local governments throughout the metro. No community will want to expose themselves to a lawsuit on the same grounds that Minneapolis has been sued. How can cities and towns faithfully execute the legislator's directive to comprehensively plan for sustainable growth when the very act of planning for that growth will expose them to legal fees and an impossible standard of environmental review? We fear that the current precedent incentivizes municipalities to either skirt the requirements of the law and thus defeat its purpose, or plan to direct all impacts from growth onto the communities with the least ability to sustain a multi-year court battle. Both outcomes would be a contravention of the ethics of our profession and affront to good governance, and that is why we strongly urge the legislature to act. The bill before you today is supported by both the APA and a broad coalition of the state's preeminent environmental groups. It would not prevent citizens from challenging environmentally harmful projects. It is narrowly tailored to simply restore the status quo for comprehensive planning as it was broadly understood until just the past couple of years. It would restore clarity on a point of law and allow planners to do the work that their communities and the legislature expect of them. This is niche but important issue, and the time is right to address it. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your testimony. Mr. Johnson, please proceed, state your name, affiliation for the record.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. Craig Johnson with the League of Minnesota Cities. Very briefly, do not want to repeat everything you've already heard, but some of our reasons that cities agree that this legislation is needed are the same as you have heard from the last two presenters. This bill amends the Metropolitan Land Planning Act, so it applies only to cities in the metropolitan area. But what we have is a very legitimate concern that what happened with Minneapolis could happen to any city in that area now, where a portion of their comprehensive plan is challenged legally and forced to go back and go through environmental review. And environmental review, as many of you are aware, is something that is normally done on a project when you know where it will be, how the land will be used, and what environmental, social, historical, and other sites are immediately adjacent to that could be affected. Then you come up with a plan for how to mitigate those as part of the environmental review process. Doing that on the theme of a general plan for a citywide development is really not even feasible. You would literally have to just say, we don't know of a specific project that this would apply to. And that doesn't help anyone, and it slows the process down tremendously. These comprehensive plans are put together by cities over years of work with extensive public hearings and involvement from every department in the city where they have the plan. And in the metropolitan area, those must meet very stringent requirements of the Metropolitan Council before they can even be approved. So one of those is increased housing density. And that's the conundrum we're in here, is as cities try to improve housing density, they're currently being faced with legal challenges to a comp plan that says they're about to do that. So, Madam Chair, we do respectfully ask that the language in lines 2.19 through 2.25 be adopted to give us a little surety of this being less of a problem. It is not where environmental review should be being used. And we do ask, Madam Chair, that future consideration of this, because it could happen with a different section of a comp plan. It could be the water use section, or the transit section, or the transportation section, and it could happen in a city outside the metropolitan area. So this is a bigger issue, but this is a good first step to address a place where it has become a problem already. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you for your testimony. And Mr. Erickson, if you could come down and take the seat, and in the meantime, we have Mr. McConnell, if you can state your name and affiliation.
Thank you, Madam Chair and committee members. My name is Dan McConnell. I'm the business manager of the Minneapolis Building and Construction Trades Council. On behalf of the 14,000 members I represent and the 25 affiliated local unions, I'm here to urge you to support Senate File 4183. As we have heard, the 2040 plan was enacted by the city of Minneapolis. It was intended to increase density where it makes sense to do that in the city of Minneapolis. Unfortunately, it's become ensnared in litigation under the Minnesota Environmental Rights Act. Our members are often frustrated by the time it takes for projects to be approved. Oftentimes, we experience that the approval process takes longer than the actual construction of the project. Since this lawsuit was filed, the number of projects being built in the city of Minneapolis to build much needed affordable housing has crawled to almost zero. We do want to ensure that our environment is protected. But in this case, we believe it's more appropriate, as other testifiers have said, to do it on a case-by-case basis rather than on the comp plan basis. Well, without this bill, cities throughout the metro will not be able to enact local comp plans without having to consider abstract what-if possibilities that could be, and lawsuits that could be brought by groups who may not have that local community's interest at heart. We urge you to adopt this bill and urge you to support it. Thank you.
Thank you, and for the concise testimony as well. Mr. Perry, if you could come forward, and Mr. Erickson, if you could state your name and affiliation for the record.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My name is Nick Erickson. I'm the Senior Director of Housing Policy for Housing First Minnesota. Our members build the communities and places that we all call home. Housing First Minnesota is pleased to be here today to support Senate File 4183 because it's a bill that closes the door to frivolous lawsuits intended to block the policies necessary to rebalance our state's housing ecosystem. As we've heard, the litigation related to environmental reviews is not just a problem here in Minnesota, but it's also a problem in California. When I talk to my friends out on the West Coast, they say that right now up to 50% of all housing applications in their state are subject to lawsuits related to environmental reviews. This is why it is an issue of concern for the housing industry, as we see that unchecked environmental review litigation will not allow us to meet our housing goals that we must reach to balance our housing market in the state. Now, this bill is about the 2040 litigation, but it does not do any land use changes, simply protects local government from litigation related to legally mandated environment or comp plan changes. That's why we're here to ask you for support, and since it's deadline week, we'll be short. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much. If Kennedy Pounds could come up next. Members, Tim Keene will not be able to be here. My understanding is Mr. Perry will be able to also cover some of that testimony as well. Well, to the best of your ability. Please state your name and proceed.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, Jack Perry from the Taft Law Firm, and I am the lawyer that's brought this case. I'm misusing, according to Senator Fatah, the mirror statute. I don't think that's accurate, but I have two parts to my testimony. The first thing is I want to identify for you what I think are the three false premises to this legislation. And then I would like to conclude with what our group believes and multiple environmentalists that I know believe to be some alternatives to look at or an alternative to look at. But first, the three false premises. The first premise you heard is that MIRA applies in the lawsuit we brought to any comprehensive plan. Well, all you need to do if you want to test that theory is to read the Supreme Court decision from February of 2021. The Supreme Court made it very clear that the lawsuit that we brought succeeded because it wasn't a general comprehensive plan. It succeeded because rather than doing a normal comprehensive plan where you say, okay, we generally want this, we generally want that, like the testifiers have said, this comprehensive plan prescribed, authorized as a matter of right through permitted uses. You've heard that, permitted uses versus conditionally permitted uses. The city of Minneapolis wanted to make sure that no one could stop its authorization, this is the language of this Minnesota Supreme Court, of nearly 150,000 new residential units. 150,000 new residential units were authorized as a matter of law. That is not like any other comprehensive plan in the state of Minnesota or the United States of America. The closest you will find in whatever research you do is 70,000 in the 216 comp plan adopted by the city of Seattle. That's the closest. So this was a massive, massive undertaking. It was not just any comp plan, and that's why this bill is premised on something that doesn't exist. The second premise that's wrong is the suggestion that, oh boy, we are under threat from these mirror lawsuits. And people like Perry and people like Mike Cerisi, the only other mirror case going on right now besides two that I have, is he handled the White Bear Lake one. And boy, we're going to have these suits all the time. Well, all you need to do is go back and look at the history of mirror. There's a bunch of mirror lawsuits in the 1970s, almost none in 1980s, almost none in 1990s at all. 2 going on right now of high profile, one White Bear Lake and one this one. And the reason is that there is no attorney fee provision. So if a citizen wants to bring a suit like this, they need to pay for it. And at last count, we started this December 4th, 2018, I guess over 5 years. Last count, over $1 million. It is not a general applicability statute because it's beyond the affordability of virtually anybody. The only time mirror cases are brought is when there's major issues going on. The comparison going on in White Bear Lake, Mike Cerisi brought a case that's going on against the DNR. What the Supreme Court found, Minnesota Supreme Court, is it was because there was 40 years of water appropriation misuse by DNR. That's something that's pretty important. The third premise that's wrong with this legislation, no offense, is that it presupposes that you are confronted with a binary choice between the environment and housing density. That's not true. There's no one in our group, nobody, that is against density. The issue is, if you're going to have 150,000 new homes authorized as a matter of right, and by the way, I want to make sure the Supreme Court, you understand, the Supreme Court said, I'm not speculating. Our group is not speculating. That's the words they use. It is what the plan provides for. And they also said the only way to look at this plan is not by individual projects. Footnote 17 of that order says, no, the only way to look at the overall impact of 150,000 new homes is through this lawsuit. There is no other avenue because you do onesies and twosies through these projects and you never get the whole picture. But I digress. The third issue is this binary choice. There is no binary choice. And there's an article written by Susan Dew, who's done a great investigative reporting on this case. In her February 18th article, she clarified that there are exactly 2 entities that have done the exact same thing that the court has ordered the City of Minneapolis to do. Moorhead voluntarily every 5 years, including on October 17, 2018, just before our lawsuit was filed. They voluntarily did environmental review to find out what the impacts are for big plans. And then Seattle. And then she interviewed in this article and asked the people in charge of these plans, are they worthwhile environmentally? And what did they say? Absolutely, they're important because you find out what the impacts are. The infrastructure bill, we were talking about that earlier. You find out what's going to happen before it happens and you can't pay for it. Also in that article,
Mr. Perry, I've been very generous here at 6 minutes. If you could just.
Okay, I thought I had more time as Mr. Keen. That's okay, I'm sorry, I apologize. I will turn and pivot to my last comment, and then I'll be done, if that's okay, Madam Chair. Well, what do we do? What are we proposing? What we are proposing is, back in 1999, some of you may be part of this, there was an issue with swine odors. And there was a big issue, and I represent a whole bunch of swine operators. And so what we did was, this body ultimately ordered, but the industry said, we have to do something. So they did a 2-year generic EIS to study it. And that's exactly what the judge has ordered in this, is that you want to find out what happens with this sort of density, you let the court-ordered EIS go through, so you have essentially a generic EIS for everyone to study and find out what are the implications. Are we right that there are massive environmental impacts? Is the Supreme Court right there's massive environmental impacts? Or is the city right that there's no issue with 150,000 new homes? Thank you for your indulgence.
Thank you for your testimony. Ms. Pounds?
Yes.
Proceed. State your name for the record, please. And
Kennedy Pounds. Good afternoon, Madam Chair and members of the community. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you today. My name is Kennedy Pounds, and I'm a Minneapolis resident and a recent graduate of the University of Minnesota with a degree in political science. I'm also a fellow through EJCC Environmental Justice Coordinating Council. Through EJCC, we amplify the voices of communities of color and low-income communities on matters of environmental justice issues and racial justice issues. We educate the public regarding reducing our carbon footprint, reducing air pollution, climate change resilience, flooding, heat zones, and the role of municipalities in being more responsive to the general public when making decisions that will have environmental impacts upon our community, such as the Herc incinerator in North Minneapolis. I'm also on the Southside Green Zone Council, which raises awareness regarding environmental issues and the need for government officials to be responsive to communities. I'm here to speak in opposition to Bill SF 4183. I'm deeply disappointed by the actions of the City of Minneapolis in abusing the legislative process to silence the voices of the people who have concerns about the environmental harms that will occur as a result of the Minneapolis 2040 plan. As opposed to doing right by its citizens and conducting a long overdue environmental impact assessment of the 2040 plan. Although the city initially tried to pitch the Minneapolis 2040 plan as an equity plan, it has done little to no engagement with the Black community or other communities of color regarding environmental justice issues or the high likelihood of the impacts of gentrification on communities of color. Government has the power. MIRA is the only check on almost unfettered governmental power. This bill, by weakening MIRA, takes away the rights of over half of Minnesotans to counter this power. MIRA is a law that has been in place for 53 years, and it gives private citizens the right to sue local governments, such as the City of Minneapolis, when they fail to follow environmental laws and choose to put profits over people. Since its adoption in 1971, MIRA has never been weaponized and isn't being weaponized now. Rather, it has served as the only mechanism to provide checks and balances for citizens to use their voices to hold governments accountable for their actions. Many of us agree that more density is a good thing. I especially understand that it can be important for addressing climate change. However, it should not come at the expense of protecting our health, environment, safety, and the quality of life of those most at risk of environmental harms and impacts, including children, elders, and those with compromised immune systems. I'm hopeful that this committee will keep intact the powerful accountability tool that MIRA provides to private citizens to keep governments honest and accountable for their actions and for mitigating harms to the environment. We don't have to choose between more density and the environment. We can do both, and we can do better. Thus, I urge you to vote no on SF 4183. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. And Mr. Getz?
Yes.
Thank you. If you could state your name and proceed.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair and members of the committee. I will testify briefly. My name is John Getz. I am president of Smart Growth Minneapolis, which brought the lawsuit that's been referred to here. And I can assure you that I and the many members of our organization and supporters would not be raising and spending hundreds of thousands of dollars on a lawsuit that was frivolous. We don't have the time, we don't have the money. I was born and raised in the city of Minneapolis and have lived here virtually all my life and worked here all my adult life. I've been an activist conservationist for many decades, including life member and supporter of the Sierra Club. I'm a lifelong Democrat. I have two comments only. First, it would be surprising and disappointing to me if my party would support a law that would nullify the applicability of the Minnesota Environmental Rights Act to municipal development plans. These plans can have dramatic environmental consequences, especially in the case of a large city such as Minneapolis. These plans should be subject to environmental review. Second, the city of Minneapolis, if the city of Minneapolis had complied with the law in the first place 5 years ago when it adopted the plan by submitting it to environmental review, which we did ask it to do, it would have avoided 5 years of expensive, non-frivolous litigation, and it would have avoided the need for the city to come before you now and ask you to bail it out of a case it lost unanimously before the Minnesota Supreme Court. You're being asked to undermine the fundamental Minnesota Environmental Protection Law, MIRA, in order to save the city from its own mistake which it has persisted in defending for 5 years, at tremendous expense to the city and to us. Thank you very much for considering my views.
Thank you for your testimony. Those are all the testifiers that I have on the list. Senator Fateh, do you have any further comments before I open for questions?
Yeah, there was a comment, thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, there's a comment around the type of review that Moorhead has done, and I was hoping to have Meg McMahon from the director, who is the director of the planning for the city of Minneapolis, come speak to that, to clear that up.
I see that person coming forward. If when you get to your seat, you could state your name and affiliation for the record, please.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, members of the committee. My name is Meg McMahon. I'm the planning director for the city of Minneapolis. And I can respond to that question. There was an article at the Star Tribune that identified a couple of different types of environmental review. Without getting too technical or in-depth around that, the city of Moorhead and the city of Seattle have been used as examples. The city of Moorhead conducts regular AUARs. These are alternate urban area-wide reviews. They do that as part of some growth areas that they have and want to understand what the impacts of that growth will have on flooding that they have in that community. AUARs are an established, well-established form of environmental review that is regulated under MIPA. Minneapolis uses AUARs regularly as well. They're very effective at evaluating contiguous development areas. So like the Ford site, for example, they conducted an AUAR. The TCAP site in Arden Hills. Most recently in Minneapolis, we conducted an AUAR in partnership with the University of Minnesota around the East Gateway District, which is a large 12-acre redevelopment area next to the stadium. So these are established. They are absolutely not intended to be used to establish or evaluate citywide hypothetical, development patterns that could include tens of thousands of buildings potentially. So just wanted to clarify that.
Thank you for that. With that, members, any questions? Senator Coran.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Senator Fateh, when you look through the intent of this bill, it's sold as it's a pathway to move forward. It's thoughtful. We've got the environment. But it also makes a wide variety of assumptions that it clarifies long-term plans from Met Council or metro municipality like Minneapolis, that increased density doesn't lead to more pollution. And so I think the process is within that 2040 plan is they want to prove it. And I think there's been a theme around all other Democrat policies that prove it first, right? It's such a great idea, prove it first. It doesn't appear to be applied in this instance. This clearly looks like it's a rescue plan for the city of Minneapolis for a policy which they've been steadfast in support since its inception of the 2040 plan. Believe me, I've tracked it. I love the 2040 plan as its use for energy. I think if it's so good, they should adopt those energy policies today. Live for what power is available in the renewable world, which you don't. In this case, maybe we should have a prove it first housing policy to match the theme that this legislature has passed over the last couple of years. But this really does look like a rescue plan to try and get Minneapolis out of being accountable for the decisioning they've made. They've brought many coalitions along to push this 2040 plan for the last 5+ years. And now you see obstacles, which are homeowners, property owners. All of them appear to be obstacles to this plan. It was news to me that one of your testifiers said that, we like to be first in Minneapolis. Doesn't mean first or successful in most things. That 150,000 housing units. Think about the impact on that. And the other testifier said, well, we've got to get those cities so they get back up to their maximum capacity. Well, what is that maximum capacity or the previous capacity? People have chosen to move and leave for various reasons. So should we force them to live there? Should we force the homeowners and the policies that you've got a landowner, you've got a private property there, you're going to have this thrust upon them and to say, well, the heck with you, We thought about you. We were in comprehensive planning to make sure everybody understands and every citizen had a role, until you come to the legislature and decide to supersede that. And that's couldn't be more clear than, at least for citizens, everybody who follows this, is that couldn't be more clear this is your rescue plan. You want to remove the citizen's voice, the environmental review, which you all preach so consistently. When you look at line 2.24 and 2.25, just so the citizens know, this is retroactive to March 1st, 2018, when they really start to highlight their 24 comprehensive planning. Remember, they talk about comprehensive planning as some of the most consistent planning, thoughtful, thorough, everything you could ever dream of in a wish. This is clearly to rescue Minneapolis from their lawsuits. So they should be proving it first to their own people by letting their own people participate. It's ignoring the request for thoughtful consideration and planning, and it certainly acts as like it knows better than its own citizens and property owners today. And so I don't think we should be playing in this role. Minnesota legislature shouldn't be coming in to rescue cities for their decisions, because they've been really confident about all the decisions and this plan should move forward. Well, then be really confident that plan would meet all the environmental assessments and prove it first. So for that, Senator Fate, I don't believe these bills should be brought to Minnesota or to the legislature for what appears to be a continuous grievance, one-off grievances, what we've seen this whole legislative session. That's not what the Minnesota legislature is for. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Curran. Senator Anderson?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Senator Fate, I see that the counties of Anoka, Carver, Dakota, are any of the county associations or any of those counties represented here that want to testify on the bill?
Senator Fate, do you know if there is someone? I am not seeing any indication that there is. Senator Anderson? Senator Fate?
Yeah, I was told cities control land use policies and not counties.
Thank you, Senator Fate.
I didn't catch that.
He said cities control land use policies, not usually counties.
Okay.
Senator McQuaid?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and Senator Fate. I appreciate you bringing this bill forward and bringing such a large coalition of folks together. I think one of the things that really struck me, so I represent the city of Apple Valley where I live, and then Eagan and Rosemount. So we have 2040 plans too. I think we started putting ours together in like 2009. I mean, it was a long time ago that we started putting together these plans. And I was at the presentation of our 2030 plan, and I was at the presentation for our 2040 plan. And the thing I remember is it was like a vision, right? It's a visionary document that says, broadly, we would like to expand here, and we'd like to turn this over here into a thing we do with this. And, we have parks that we'd hope to build, and we have business developments that we'd like to have in certain places and housing we'd like to have in certain places. It would have been impossible, and it would be impossible today to do an environmental review of that plan, because it is not saying on this plot of land we're going to build this number of units, and over here we're going to build this business, and over here we're going to have this parking lot. That's not how 2040 plans, that's not how any of the plans work. And so I really didn't like when they were saying it just authorized 150,000 units as if they all have addresses and they're in the process. It sounds like it could have been, right? And that depends on the builders, which we have the builders with us today, and time and money and profit probably. And so I just, the thing that really is striking to me is what often happens now that we don't specifically use racialized language in our zoning, we use other language, and we co-opt the language of equity to say, well, it has to be smart. And we talk about the property owners when we know what that means. And we talk about the, homeowners, because we know who we're talking about. And so I really appreciate you bringing this forward, because I still hear the coded language. I still hear what the purpose and the point is, to have single-family home developments and 3-car garages, and respecting the homeowners, because we know what kinds of people in Minnesota are homeowners, and we know which ones are not. And if we want to actually put people in homes, which is the goal, and we talked about how this environmental review hasn't been used before. I have a feeling that's because Minneapolis was the first city in the country to do away with this single-family zoning, which is historic and is important, but also does a lot for diversifying our neighborhoods. It does a lot for making sure that certain people have housing, especially affordable housing. So this coalition that you put together supporting your bill says a lot to me. And having the League of Minnesota Cities, which all the cities I represent be part of, be concerned, says a lot to me. And so I really appreciate you bringing this forward, and I look forward to this passing so we can get this done, because I think our city's on like the 2060 plan now, so.
Thank you, Senator May-Quade. Senator Drazkowski.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thanks for the bill, Senator Fateh. I don't know, this is, for a rural guy, this is kind of interesting stuff. I just read the subdivision 5 out of 116B.02 in the Minnesota Environmental Rights Act, and it's certainly not a portion of statute that I travel over very often. But as I look at, this is really kind of an awkward approach, and I understand there's a lawsuit and you're trying to somehow from the periphery with this eclectic set of findings that you have in here. I mean, I don't agree with what you've got in 1.9 and 1.10 here, and a lot of what you've got in here. But to do this, to find a way around the what is in subdivision 5 of 116B.02, why don't you just make an amendment to that section of law, Senator Fateh? This seems like it seems like almost a Minnesota policy passive-aggressive approach to the problem. I mean, I think you'd find it much more direct to just go in and write some sort of planning city metropolitan exception. And obviously the reason is because you've got to the sides of you environmental activists that will chew your head off if you do something like that, would be my guess. So meant that rhetorically, of course, Senator Fateh. But this is really an awkward approach to a problem instead of just going directly after it. Maybe consider going after doing some amendments to the Minnesota Environmental Rights Act to bring that to be more common sense rather than as radical as it is now. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Senator Drazkowski. Seeing no further comments, Senate File 4183 is laid over for possible inclusion. Up next is Senate File 4718, Senator Anderson. Senator Anderson, please proceed when you are ready and when you would like to offer the A1 amendment.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, members of the committee. Senate File 4718 is before you, and I have the A1 author's amendment to add to this to help in concerns that were brought forward by local emergency responders. So, Madam Chair, I'd like to move that amendment to be added to Senate File 4718, please.
Senator Anderson has moved the A1 amendment. This is the first stop of the bill. All in favor of the A1 amendment, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, say nay. The amendment is adopted. Senator Anderson, to your bill.
Thank you. I have a testifier. One of my testifiers has put a letter in your packet for the read. He, because of the weather, circumstances cannot be with us, but I do have another testifier that will be with us. But the amendment adds a requirement that battery charge security fences must include an emergency responder disconnect switch that is compatible with switches used by local emergency responders. The language was drafted by in consultation with the Fire Marshals Association of Minnesota. I want to thank Senator Carlson for being a co-author on the bill, and I have our testifiers to come before us and talk about the bill. And I authored the bill because these systems are a safe and effective way to protect expensive vehicles and other property that must be stored outdoors. Theft of copper wires and wire and precious metal contained in catalytic converters in vehicles has become an increasing problem in Minnesota and in the Twin City area. And there are multiple bills introduced at this session to try and deal with this kind of theft. And Madam Chair, before I go along, I'd just like to have our testifier come forward with his testimony.
Thank you. Mr. Pate is virtual. If you could please proceed. We do not see you. If you cannot come on camera, that is fine. There we go. Okay, proceed.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Members of the committee, I'm basically here today to support.
I apologize. Could you please state your name and affiliation for the record?
My name is Michael Pate. I'm the Director of Government Relations with Amarok. Amarok is one of the larger installers of these devices in the country. Basically, what we're looking at here is a device that goes inside of a permitted fence or barrier by the local authorities that's used as a deterrent and also as an alarm. Basically, what we're looking for here is to have these devices defined and permitted as alarms because that's what they are. They're all powered by 12-volt batteries. They're never hooked up to the electrical infrastructure at all. Those 12-volt batteries are powered by solar panels. We were green before green was cool in 1993. The reason we do this is because if anything happens to the structure itself, we're always up and running. To the electrical infrastructure, we're always up and running. So 12-volt battery basically goes into an energizer. That energizer takes that 12 volts and amplifies it to around 7,000 to 9,000 volts. That takes 1.1 second. Once that energy is in that energizer, it's released down an interior line inside the existing permitted fence line back to an alarm system. And if that energy does not return at full capacity, the alarm starts a countdown. 5 consecutive negative returns. We set the alarm off, go through a call list. So we'll call up the first person on the list, tell them what's going on. They'll bring up the cameras on that particular site, making sure everything's okay. Hey, we had a snowstorm, knocked out the fence on the northeast corner. Let's button it up and go back to bed. Or I got 5 guys in a flatbed truck, cut a hole in my fence. They're robbing me blind. Please call the local police department. These devices are inherently safe. They are tested and labeled to the national and international standards, 60335-2-76. There are literally hundreds of thousands of these devices out in the countryside and tens of thousands in urban areas. There are 22 states who have passed similar legislation that is in front of you, including Oregon, Massachusetts, and Michigan, Wisconsin, a few of your neighbors. So we would ask that you please support this bill and move it forward, and I'm open for any questions, Madam Chairman.
Thank you. Senator Anderson, any further comments before we open it to questions?
No, Madam Chair, I just wanted to make sure that members of the committee are aware that there are concerns within our cities of theft, especially from our businesses, commercials, and this basically is dealing with commercial side. It doesn't deal with residential at all. It basically is a way to circumvent, or I should say, not circumvent, but to curtail theft of high expensive property that has been an ongoing problem here in not only the Twin Cities, but across the state of Minnesota. So, Madam Chair, I just like to open it up to committee's questions.
Thank you. Members, are there any questions? Senator Anderson, I actually do have a question. So with this requirement, what would be the cost to someone who has an individual fence under this?
The cost for this?
Yes.
I guess I would defer to my testifier on that as far as the cost.
Thank you, Madam
Mr.
Chair. Cost varies according to the length. Everything's done on linear foot, obviously. So it just depends. It's fairly expensive. It's not cheap. A rack rate is somewhere around 50 to 70 cents per foot installed. We work on an alarm type contract where we're basically providing the service. We install, we maintain, we monitor on a 3 to 5 year contract. Some of the other players in this business basically sell it outright for a set fixed price and then come back in for maintenance on a per dip basis. So it just depends, really. Our average installation cost is somewhere around $1,600 or $1,700 per month over 3 to 5 years.
Thank you. So Senator Anderson, someone who had a fence would now be required to have this additional cost, even if they lived in the middle of nowhere and weren't concerned about the theft issue, they would now be required to have this cost?
Madam Chair, the fence, if there's a fence already there at present time, this fence then would be kind of the outer fence, and then there would be electric fence that would be put inside of that. So a person could come through one fence, and then this other fence that would be installed would be the electric fence. So there's kind of a barrier there between properties of individuals, so they wouldn't have to install another two fences, but there is a requirement to have a barrier of like a 5-foot wall prior to the electric fence, which has to be at a higher, like a 10 to 12-foot fence that has to be installed, and that's been hooked up to the electricity to prevent invasion into the property.
So again, just so I understand, Senator Anderson, if a person didn't feel like they had the need for this and didn't want this on their property, under the new bill, they would still be required to have it and still be required to bear all that expense?
They would, if they didn't want that, if they didn't want this on their property, they wouldn't have to have it.
Thank you, Senator Anderson. Senator McQuaid.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I appreciated the testimony and the letter saying that there's not a risk to children or animals. But my concern is, Senator Anderson, is that there have been deaths by children whose heads have touched electrified fences like these. And I think to this day, the advice is still to not have your head or neck come in contact with fences like these. And so I have a toddler, and they don't read, and they certainly don't obey. They do dumb things all the time. I think her life goal is to see how many ways I can stop her from trying to launch herself off things she shouldn't be standing on in the first place. And so when I'm thinking of just having this out, or a city not being able to say, hey, actually, this isn't an appropriate place for something like this, that worries me a little bit, because, municipalities are all really different and they have really different things. I mean, my daughter's daycare is not in a residential area, and so what if the fence next door to her daycare decided they wanted to put in a electric charge fence or a battery fence? Can they do that?
Madam Chair.
Senator Anderson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Senator McQuaid, they have to have a fence of at least 5 foot high, and that's not electrically charged. Then they have another fence within that fence that's electrically charged because of the content of the property within their particular business. It's for commercial use only, not to be considered in a residential area where there would be that. I would guess a daycare probably wouldn't go into a commercial area or property like that. And so there's a barrier there, so a youngster or something, if they did come along, they would butt up against that first barrier. They would then have to literally crawl over that fence to get to the next fence.
Senator McQuaid.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Senator Anderson. So if I'm thinking of like my high school, which is not in a residential area, but there's businesses on the property on the other side of the soccer fields, could they then put up a battery fence or an electric fence like this where teenagers could scale, I mean, some easily a 5-foot fence and get to a fence like this?
Madam Chair.
Senator Anderson.
Thank you, Senator McQuaid. Excuse me. The business there, if they have property that they're concerned about being lost, or they have claims of having property lost because of the local police department or something, they can come and put that first barrier fence up and along with another barrier on top of it. So to say this is a cheap way of going about, but it's also a means by which to curtail people stealing individual commercial property. It's a defense that businesses that are losing money because of stealing, most likely teenagers are not necessarily going to go and jump and go after something within a confined area like that, unless they're basically thieves. I'm not calling them thieves, but I'm saying if they want to be that, then they will be at the hands of emergency responders, because the electric fence, which according to Dr. Kroll and others that have testified that within your packet have said this is not going to have a negative where it's going to kill somebody. It will stop them, and it will make an alert to the system so that early responders are aware of the situation that someone is trying to break in to their property. So it's not intentionally to go after and hurt young people or others that are going to be going over a fence, like say a athletic fence. But then there's another fence on top of that they would have to go over and then reach the electric fence on top of it. And maybe my testifier can give us a little bit better clarification than what I just gave.
Madam Chair, for time, we don't have to. I mean, I understand. I think my concern is that young people don't always do things in a linear, logical fashion. So maybe they're not jumping over to steal something. Maybe they're jumping over specifically to touch it or specifically to wire it in a way that makes it more painful. I mean, that was my question, is whether somebody could have a fence like this, like near a school property or next to a school property, and the city wouldn't be able to say, actually, that's not a really appropriate place for a fence like this. That was my question, and you did answer it, which it would be yes.
Thank you, Senator McQuaid. Mr. Pate did put his hand down, so, okay. Any further questions? Seeing no further questions, Senate File 4718, as amended, is laid over for possible inclusion.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, committee
Thank
members.
you. Senate, last on our agenda today is Senate File 4796, Senator Swazinski.
I wanted to see that.
He does. Thank you for stepping forward, Senator Swazinski. I understand you might have an amendment.
I have the A1 amendment, yes, Madam Chair.
Members, you might not have had the A1 in your packet. That is being passed around right now. This is the first stop of this bill. Senator Swazinski, would you like to move that first?
Yes, I would, Madam Chair, thank you.
Senator Swazinski moves the A1 amendment. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. The amendment is adopted. Senator Swazinski, please proceed with your bill.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Hennepin County approached me a couple months ago about an idea to make it more, the set-asides that they created, to make it easier for companies that the current threshold is a majority of people have to be on rehab. How do you say that word? Go ahead.
Rehabilitative services.
Yes, that word. And they'd like to lower that threshold.
Senator Swazinski,
agree.
we didn't actually catch the word on this side.
He'll say it. When
Okay, in his
during
testimony. Okay.
Yeah, okay, thank you. I'm going to give the two testifiers all the time that I would have taken, and because I'm starting to mumble after 4 hours.
Mr. Rosenfeld, I have you first. Would you proceed? Please state your name and affiliation for the record.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My name is Michael Rosenfeld. I'm the Manager of Negotiated Procurement with Hennepin County's Purchasing Department. This proposal is rooted in the county's desire to gain an additional tool to promote career pathways into the building trades for residents under court supervision, such as probationers and parolees. Hennepin County has been using its set-aside contracting authority in Section 383B to contract with nonprofit organizations whose employees are actually the clients of those organizations. That organizational model fits well with the statute's requirement that the set-aside contract can only be awarded to an organization if a majority of its employees would need public assistance or rehabilitative services without the set-aside contract. The problem is this requirement can't be met by most construction firms. The reason being, of course, most employees of a construction firm have specialized experience, skills, and they hold licenses. And so we're really missing the opportunity to use this authority with those types of contracts. So what the bill will allow us to do is use the county set-aside contracting authority with construction businesses and substituting the requirement that I just mentioned with the requirement that the construction business employ as many people from this cohort as is practicable to deliver the construction contract. And that is taking into account industry safety standards, ratios, supervisory ratios between journeymen and apprentices, and licensure requirements. All of the things that should be taken into consideration when making this type of decision. So we believe those are the right factors to balance when establishing this contractual requirement for a construction firm. And we would include that requirement stated as a minimum number of hours that have to be performed by persons from that cohort. My colleague, Logan Federer, who will speak in a moment, manages a program for the county's corrections department that provides classroom and on-the-job training for probationers and parolees. Our goal, which this legislation will enable, is to expand our use of county construction projects as a platform for ex-offenders to receive on-the-job training so they can advance into the well-paid, skilled craft positions that are available within the construction industry. Madam Chair, with your permission, Mr. Federer will briefly describe the program he manages. And in closing, I'd like to thank the committee for giving us this opportunity to explain the bill, and I would be happy to answer any questions now or after Mr. Federer's remarks.
We'll finish with the testimony first. Mr. Federer, if you could please state your name and affiliation for the record and proceed.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My name is Logan Footer, and I'm the Hennepin County Productive Day Program Manager. The Productive Day Program is a paid employment training program for people on probation and parole supervised by Hennepin County. We're a Carpenters Union signatory, and participants receive on-the-job training 4 days a week under direction and instruction by union journeyman carpenter foreman. A fifth day of classroom education includes cognitive skills, union-developed carpentry curriculum, employment readiness, and financial preparedness skills. Currently, our participants focus on residential rehab projects. This bill would expand opportunities for our participants, allowing them to be exposed to commercial construction work and skill building, and allow them to work directly with potential employers on numerous county projects. The end goal to this being long-term stable employment.
Thank you for your testimony. Do any members have any questions on the bill? Seeing no questions, I will just say I think it's wonderful that there are opportunities for people as part of their rehabilitation to both learn a trade that is useful to the rest of us, because when I call someone to help at the house or whatever else, you know, we always need more workers, and also to give people a path to turn their life around and have meaningful employment after that. So I think this is lovely. With that, Senate File 4796, as amended, is laid over for possible inclusion.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator.
Members, that concludes our committee for today. We will reconvene on Tuesday depending on our floor schedule. Thank you and have a nice recess.